We've heard from the hardline news agency that represents the IRGC saying that this retreat has actually allowed them to examine the way forward.
All right, thanks, Nick. Wolf, I'm going to go to you with some breaking news.
This is CNN Breaking News.
Very sad breaking news indeed, and for me, very personally sad breaking news coming into the Situation Room. Ted Turner has died at the age of 87. The innovator, an icon, a legend. He revolutionized the television business by creating the first 24-hour news channel right here at CNN. And he hired me many, many years ago. Here's a closer look back at the life and legacy of one of the greatest visionaries of our time.
He broke every mold. He changed the world.
Known as the Mouth of the South and Captain Outrageous, Ted Turner built a media empire that changed cable news forever.
I didn't have any upper limits to how far we could go.
Champion, philanthropist, environmentalist.
I don't know how to quit. It's not in my genes.
But growing up wasn't easy for Ted. Born in Cincinnati, Ohio in 1938, his parents sent him to boarding school when he was just 4 years old.
I didn't like boarding school. I wanted to be home.
Ted's little sister, whom he adored, died of lupus at 17. About 2 years later, Ted dropped out of Brown University. He'd been studying classics until his father cut off the money.
He thought I was wasting my time.
So he went to work for his dad's billboard company. But tragedy struck again when his father killed himself.
He went against everything that he taught me, you know, to be courageous and hang in there.
Ted took over the family business and coped with the loss by working even harder.
He said, set your goals so high that you can't achieve them in your lifetime.
When Ted wasn't working, he turned to the sport he loved, sailing.
We gotta go fast as we can here.
And won the sport's top race, the America's Cup.
I had worked very hard. It took me a number of years to become a champion.
He put that same drive into expanding the business. In 1970, Ted bought a struggling TV station.
It was a broken down UHF television station in Atlanta. He was going to transform UHF television into this new world of satellite television.
Ted renamed the station WTBS, and it became the country's first superstation.
What Ted made happen was just as important as the internet revolution of the 90s and 2000s.
But starting out, Ted needed content. He bought the Atlanta Braves and broadcast their games nationwide.
The Atlanta Braves.
The Braves became America's team.
When we bought them in 1976, they were terrible.
By 1995, Ted and his team were World Series champs. As he built the superstation, he set his sights even higher on a 24-hour news channel.
I worked till 7 o'clock, and when I got home, the news was over. So I missed television news completely, and I figured there were lots of people like me.
People did look upon that as a foolish idea that was destined for failure, but they underestimated Ted Turner.
Most of the leaders of the world thought Ted was nuts.
We sign on June 1, and barring satellite problems in the future, we won't be signing off until the world ends. We'll be on, we will cover it live. I dedicate the news channel for America, the cable news network.
Take 11, Mike Keel.
CNN aired its first broadcast on June 1st, 1980.
Good evening, I'm David Walker.
And I'm Lois Hart. Now here's the news.
It took 5 years to turn a profit.
I lived for 20 years in my office.
He was one of us. I mean, he would be in his house coat down having breakfast in the Hard News Cafe.
And we'll get better by the end of the week.
Critics called it chicken noodle news. But the Gulf War would give CNN the respect it deserved.
You can hear the bombs now. They are hitting the center of this city.
It was the first time a war was broadcast live on television, and it was only on CNN.
I still believe that was the greatest scoop in the history of journalism.
You can see her there.
Ted didn't care as much about ratings as he did about being the most trusted name in news.
Ted also cared about the world. Over a 10-year period, he donated $1 billion to the United Nations.
I'm no poorer than I was not 9 months ago, and the world is a lot better off.
And he expanded his empire, launching networks like TNT and Turner Classic Movies. In his personal life, Ted was married and divorced twice with 5 children before he finally met his match, Jane Fonda.
She agreed to have dinner with me. For me, it was love at first sight.
I can't ever forget the reasons that made me fall in love with him. I've never met any human being that thinks the way Ted does.
Ted was a visionary, a titan, even Time Magazine's Man of the Year. But in 1996, he sold his networks to Time Warner. He got almost $8 billion.
I said, Ted, if you sell, you will no longer be captain of your own ship.
Ted Turner. Ted.
5 years later, Time Warner merged with AOL, and Ted was out.
Ted used the description, I've been fired. Ted got shafted, and it hurt.
It was more than just a company to me. It was a way of life.
He lost his empire and the love of his life. After 10 years of marriage, he and Jane parted ways. But you love her still?
Yeah.
To this very day?
To this very day.
But Ted never gave up. His final act, saving the planet. He created the UN Foundation and the Nuclear Threat Initiative. On his Montana ranch, he made it his mission to save the bison.
Hi. Well, you never go home, do you?
I know.
And he opened restaurants to ensure their survival.
Ted's love of the outdoors has made him perhaps the #1 environmentalist that I've ever known.
Before his 80th birthday, Ted revealed he had Lewy body dementia, a progressive disease. He spent his final years treasuring private moments, his ranch, and his family.
He wants to know that when he goes out, it will be with the love of his children and grandchildren.
You can never take away what he created and what he did.
We have never seen a man quite like Ted Turner before on this planet. And I don't think we'll ever see another one like him again.
A very, very sad moment. And, you know, Pamela, especially for those of us who worked so closely over the years with Ted Turner, he hired me back in 1990, and I remember he told me when he hired me, remember, we're the cable news, capital N, capital E, capital W, capital S. We're the cable news network. This is where the news comes first, and your vacations and everything else comes second. So he was so determined to make sure that the news was strong, was reliable, was fair, and he inspired me and so many other journalists to work and report the news fairly and accurately, and if possible, break those stories first. It was just so sad. I saw him a few months ago in Atlanta, and we had lunch, and it was just so painful to see how he had deteriorated his health over the years, because a while earlier I went out to Montana, spent some time with him at his ranch, out there, and it was a very different kind of Ted Turner at that time. Yeah. But it was just painful, and we're going to miss him. I'm going to miss him a lot personally because of all the wonderful things that he did.
We wouldn't be here without Ted Turner. CNN wouldn't be here without Ted Turner. He was truly an entrepreneur, a maverick, and he made his vision come to life and has had a tremendous impact all around the world, Wolf. And you've told me so many times over the years what Ted Turner told you about the news coming first. And Wolf, you have lived that every step of the way in your career. He has just been such an inspiration for all of us. And his family released this statement saying that he passed away at age 87. It says, on behalf of the Turner family, it is with great sadness that we announce the passing of philanthropist, environmentalist, and cable pioneer Ted Turner, who died peacefully today at age 87, surrounded by his family. And it goes on to talk about all of his accomplishments. But Wolf, you knew him on that personal level. So many of us know him as the founder of Turner Networks and CNN, but you knew him on that personal level. Tell us more about him at that level.
It was a dramatic moment, and a moment that really changed CNN. The start of Operation Desert Storm, the war with Saddam Hussein in Iraq. And I was the Pentagon correspondent. We had 3 reporters in Baghdad at the time, and the decision had to be made. Do we keep those reporters in Baghdad once the U.S. airstrikes start, or do we tell them to get out as quickly as possible? And I was getting calls from the Secretary of Defense at the time, Dick Cheney, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Colin Powell. I was the Pentagon correspondent saying, you got to get your people out of the Al Rashid Hotel in Baghdad. That's where Iraqi intelligence has a huge base. We're going to bomb that place. Get your people out as quickly as possible. And I passed that along to Ted Turner, and he and the other leaders of CNN, especially him, spoke to all of our people in Baghdad, whether it was Bernie Shaw, Peter Arnett, John Holloman, all of our reporters in Baghdad, and they all said, we want to stay and report the news from Baghdad. This war is beginning. It's important that our viewers in the United States and around the world actually see what is going on. So they stayed, they risked their lives, and it was just a major moment in the history of CNN. But it was Ted Turner who said to them, if you want to stay, we'll support you, we'll do whatever we can to help you. You don't have to come back. It was his decision, and it was a powerful decision. And I remember at the time I was worried about our people in Baghdad because it was a real war that was about to begin. And he was determined to have the news come first. And we were the only television news network that kept reporters and had a camera there to report what was going on. It was just a very dramatic moment. And Pamela, when he hired me, he also said something that has always stayed with me. He said, CNN will be seen in the United States, but it's also so important that it's seen around the world. And that's why he created CNN International, because he felt, and he was an idealistic guy, he felt that if people all over the world were seeing the same news, maybe the world would be a little bit more peaceful and a little bit better. And that's why he created CNN International and CNN US, so that people all over the world would be watching the same news. And it was really important. And to this day, people all over the world, they're watching my show, they're watching our show, and everybody is seeing what's going on. And it's really an important milestone that Ted Turner helped put forward. It was just a very, very powerful moment indeed. And we're going to miss him. He was just such a great, great guy. And it's so sad to have to report that he has passed away.
Yeah, truly a legend, creating something that didn't exist before. And you have to think about all the times he was told, you can't do that. You can't create a cable network all around the world. And he did. And it has sustained for so many decades. I want to bring in someone who is very familiar with his work, and that would be Tom Johnson, the former president of CNN, who was a close friend of Ted Turner. Tom, are you there?
I am, Pamela.
Tell us first how you're feeling with this news. I was sad to report it to be the first person to tell you this morning.
I'm very saddened by it. I mean, Ted had become not just my leader, the chief executive to whom I reported directly for 11 years, but became really my very, very close personal friend. And I have to say, you don't use this expression too often, I guess, men to men, but I truly loved the guy.
Tell us more about why you loved him and the impact he has had on this world, Tom.
When Ted was recruiting me to come to CNN in 1990, I asked him, Ted, what do you expect of me? His exact words were, Tom, I want us to make CNN the best news network on the planet. And then I asked, what else? And he said, that's it, pal.
You know, that's what he often told me that too, Tom. So I can definitely confirm. He would often say to me, just report the news. Don't worry about any fallout. Just be honest and fair and responsible and get that news out there. And if you can break the story, do that, obviously. That's really important. We want the whole world, not just people in the United States, the whole world to be watching CNN. And the whole world has been watching CNN. And Tom, as you well know, I can't go anywhere in the world without people stopping me, whether I'm in the U.S., obviously, or in Europe, or in Saudi Arabia, or Africa. People are, Mr. the Wolf, Mr. the CNN, Mr. the CNN. They're always stopping me every place I go because of Ted Turner's creativity and his genius in creating a news network that was seen live around the world.
And Pamela, when Eason Jordan, the head of our international desk at the time, became convinced there would be war between the United States and Baghdad to get us in and get us positioned, I went to Ted. I said, Ted, in order for it to cover this impending war, we're going to need to spend perhaps over $30 million more than our budget. And I said, what am I authorized to spend? And I said, tell me what. He said, in the clearest tone, but very emphatic, you spend whatever you think it takes, pal. And we did. We set out to put in place the portable uplinks, to put in place all the various logistics and personnel at the time. And so when that war between the coalition forces and the Iraqis erupted, it was because of Ted that we were prepared to be the first and, in many ways, the only network to provide the global coverage as we were able to provide.
Wow. And let me just point out to our viewers, and Tom, you remember this well, all sorts of networks around the world were dumping their own coverage and just asking CNN, can we report, can we have access to your video from Baghdad, can we have access to your live coverage? And CNN was seen on the state media from all these countries all over the world. It was just a very, very powerful moment. And Ted had a vision that he had created this opportunity for CNN, and it really developed and paid off. It was a turning point in CNN's history because all of a sudden people all over the world wanted to watch CNN for good reason. We were reporting the news fairly and accurately and powerfully with unique capabilities. It was just an extremely wonderful moment for all of us.
And Pamela, the other thing that was so important to all of us, I asked Ted, what are your policies as it relates to news coverage? He said, I have one, to be fair. And that meant to be fair to all sides and not just to be, pro one side or pro the other side, but to really be fair. And then I said, well, Ted, I have one policy coming from my years at the Los Angeles Times, which is to be accurate. And he said, well, that's it. We want to be the most accurate and the most fair network of them all with honest and reliable and unbiased information that are provided, particularly to people in the world who were living under communism in Russia and in China and in Cuba. Accurate information that they could know was the truth.
And
it's true. And I just want to point out, Tom, you and I remember well when the Soviet Union collapsed, Gorbachev made the announcement. He invited you and the leaders of CNN to come because we had been reporting from the streets of Moscow the protests that were going on, calling for a new regime, ending the communist regime of some 74 years in the Soviet Union. Thanks to Ted Turner's creativity and his honesty and his willingness to report the news, even in dangerous situations. And you were there, I was there, when Gorbachev signed that document ending the Soviet Union and praising CNN for our coverage. He credited our coverage in the United States and around the world for helping to lead to that moment. It was just such a powerful moment. And when he went to sign it, just tell the story, Tom. He went to sign it with his pen, but his pen wasn't working.
When Gorbachev went to sign the document, resigning as the head of the then Soviet Union, and to sign the document conveying the power of government to Boris Yeltsin, his pen did not work. And the pen of his press secretary did not have one. So I handed him my Mont Blanc pen, and he asked me, Tom, is it American? And I said, no, Mr. President, it's not. And anyway, he signed away the power that he had with the Mont Blanc pen, and I had the audacity to ask him to get it back after he completed the ceremony.
And that pen is, I think, hanging in your office right now. It's a real memento for a historic moment in the history of the world. Indeed, I was there and I watched it all unfold, and it was such a powerful moment. And I always assumed it wasn't just a Mont Blanc pen, it was a CNN pen that was used to sign that document ending the Soviet Union.
That's right.
I also love just to talk to him also
there
about
so many qualities to him.
Go ahead. I was going to get to that, Tom, the other qualities he had beyond his successes. Go ahead.
Yes. Well, I mean, when I think about Ted, I mean, yes, I think about our coverage of the fall of the Soviet Union, the O.J. Simpson trial, the Balkan Wars, the impeachment of President Clinton, the Waco siege, the death of Princess Diana. But beyond that, I think about, you know, he in his life, he won the America's Cup, the renowned sailing race. He bought the Atlanta Braves and transformed them from one of baseball's worst teams into one of his best. But beyond that, I mean, he donated $1 billion to create the United Nations Foundation so he could fund humanitarian causes such as helping refugees, fighting disease, and clearing landmines. He and former U.S. Senator Sam Nunn created an organization called the Nuclear Threat Initiative. It exists very much today to reduce the dangers of nuclear weapons. He was such a wonderful, wonderful steward of the land. I mean, he acquired and worked to restore over 2 million acres. He cleaned up the streams. He removed the cattle. He reintroduced the bison, and today he has, I believe, 45,000 head of bison. But he even, you know, brought back the gray wolves, and he could see, on his land, you could go and see how our nation was at the time the Native Americans roamed there. So, I mean, it's just an incredible caring about the world in which we lived, and particularly along with Jane Fonda. I mean, he cared a great deal and did what he could on world peace. He so wanted CNN to serve as a way in which people could communicate, and not only in English, but CNN moved into other languages beginning after English with Spanish. But just an extraordinary human being that cared deeply about each other. And I will never forget seeing Ted walking down the streets of Atlanta. I was with him, and he would stop and pick up trash and hold it in his arm until he got to the next trash can. And I asked, what other billionaire in the world would be picking up trash on the streets and putting in that trash can? That was Ted Turner.
Yeah, it was just such an amazing, powerful, wonderful human being. Everything he did, and especially when he took me on a tour of his Montana ranch, we saw the bison, we saw all that land out there. He was so proud of the creativity, the environmental strength that he was bringing to that whole area, and it just inspired me to really appreciate what he was doing. I want to bring in our chief media analyst, Brian Stelter, right now. Brian, talk a little bit about the way Ted Turner transformed our news and media environment.
Goodness gracious, Wolf. No one who ever had the chance to meet Ted Turner ever forgot about the meeting. His energy, his swagger, his drive, his focus, those skills, that's what helped him change this world. He democratized news, also democratized access to the news in all the ways that you all have been discussing. And right now, so many hundreds of people, so many people watching right now, so many CNN employees, past and present, so many alums. They all know they owe their careers and their livelihoods to Ted. That's true even at CNN's rivals, because he did create this entire concept of the 24-hour news channel. And I know people are watching right now, CNN alums watching with sorrow in their hearts, but with gratitude to Ted for all that he gave to this world. We've heard just now from CNN CEO and Chairman Mark Thompson reflecting on this moment. He says, Ted was an intensely involved and committed leader, intrepid, fearless, and always willing to back a hunch and trust his own judgment. He was and always will be the presiding spirit of CNN. Ted is the giant on whose shoulders we stand, and we will all take a moment today to recognize him and his impact on our lives and the world. Thinking personally for a moment, Ted is survived by 5 children, 14 grandchildren, and 2 great-grandchildren. And Wolf, as you mentioned in your obit, he lived with Lewy body dementia for almost a decade. He was even on Zoom, on Skype, talking with friends just a couple of weeks ago. But in recent days, I'm told he did transition to hospice care, and so many members of his family gathered by his bedside to be with Ted in his final days. 87 years old, an extraordinary life, and there's so much we can learn from him even today. You know, of all of the accomplishments in Ted's life, the yachts, the philanthropy, the environmentalism, the land, the millions of acres of land, CNN was what he cherished the most. CNN was always his greatest achievement. He cared deeply about the network, even after it went out of his possession. He even talked about a decade ago about an idea trying to take over CNN, trying to buy it back. He was reportedly concerned about Trump interference during Trump's first term. Thankfully, there was none of that interference, but he was concerned about CNN even then, and he always expressed a deep, heartfelt desire to see the network grow and be stronger all around the world. I was just looking at one of Ted's books, Call Me Ted. He has a brilliant quote in this about why CNN was successful. He said, "We put journalism first, and that's how we built CNN into something the world wanted to watch."
You know, he was such a great journalist, and he was so fair, so responsible. One of the first things he said to me when he hired me, Brian, and I'll never forget it, and it's a simple thing that all journalists should do. He said, if you're going to report something negative about somebody, make sure you give that person a chance to respond in advance before you put it on the air, before you report it. Let's hear what that person has to say, and then you can report whatever you want, and you can mention what this individual is saying in reaction. He was just always determined to be fair and responsible. It's a basic element of serious journalism, but it was one of the first things he told me when he hired me. Always give that individual, if you're going to report something negative about that person, a chance to respond in advance, and make sure you put that on the air with whatever else you're going to be reporting. It was just a unique moment that I'll never forget.
That's so interesting to hear you share that, Wolf. I think that's really telling, because he did not come from a journalism background, right? He came in as a businessman, as a maverick. He was in the billboard business. He always cared about getting attention. He was so theatrical. He knew how to put on a show. He built up his entertainment channels. You know, he even created wasn't it the Captain America, the cartoon? He created that character. But when it came to journalism, he saw an opening in the marketplace, and he understood the fundamentals of news. He hired the right people, put them in the right places. But Wolf, what you're describing is that deep understanding of the core tenets of journalism that he was able to support and essentially finance and provide a ground floor, a foundation for CNN. It was not easy in the early years, 1981, 1982. I'm working on a piece right now for CNN.com about just how hard it was to actually launch this channel when so many people doubted it was possible. When there were simply evening newscasts at 6:30 p.m. and that was really the only option on television. The deck was stacked so enormously against Ted Turner, and that's what made the achievement all the more incredible.
I think that context is so important. He just had a will to succeed. He had a vision, and he believed in his vision because he thought it would be good for the world, and he delivered. And he has had this tremendous impact all over the world for so many decades. And you talk about Brian and Wolf, that he really understood the fundamentals of journalism, and that he put the right people in the right places. And Wolf, I just want you to tell us a little bit more about your backstory of being hired, because at the time, you were a reporter at the Jerusalem Post, right? I mean, you were not front and center on people's televisions. You had written a book, but he spotted you. He had an eye for talent, and he spotted you. Tell us more about that and how you landed at the Pentagon without really having what you thought at the time, maybe all the credentials that you thought someone might need for that role.
During my earlier years as a journalist, I was invited a few times to be a guest on CNN because I was breaking stories in the Jerusalem Post, and they noticed that. And Ted Turner noticed that. He told me personally, and he said, we wanted you to come on. And then I came on as an analyst and a reporter, and I wasn't hired by CNN at the time, just coming on as a guest. And they liked me, and all of a sudden at one point, Ted Turner said to me, we have an opening. We want you to be our Pentagon correspondent. And I said, Pentagon correspondent. I said, I'm not really an expert on the Pentagon or the military, but he said, you're a great journalist. You're breaking stories. You can go to the Pentagon. You can go to Toledo. You can go to Timbuktu. You'll break news. That's what we want at CNN. We want you to go to the Pentagon and break news. That was my first day at the Pentagon, May 8th, 1990. And I thought it was going to be a relatively slow beat because the Cold War was winding down. The U.S. was closing a lot of military bases all over the country. I thought it would be a slow beat, but a few months later, Saddam Hussein invades Kuwait. Operation Desert Shield becomes Operation Desert Storm, and then everybody on earth is watching CNN and watching me report from the Pentagon, military affairs correspondent. And it changed my life, obviously. It changed CNN's life, and it was just a very proud moment in the history of journalism, especially for me, watching all of this unfold. And it was just a really great moment indeed, and I'll never forget that.
And Brian, I think that says a lot, right? That he was this visionary with starting CNN and all of these other companies as well that we've been talking about. But that, he was willing to take risks, and those risks paid off.
There's an element of Elon Musk to his story. There's an element of Jeff Bezos to this story. The billionaires that we hear about today and the way that they are building the systems of the future, that's who Ted Turner was decades ago and for many decades throughout his career. He figured out ways to take small local stations that were over the airwaves and turn them into national networks, CNN being one of those. But let's go back to 79 and 1980 for a moment. Banks laughed at him. Potential partners rejected him. Newspaper owners mocked the idea of CNN. But he persevered and he won because of those risks, Pamela. It's really an amazing story. He had to fight over satellite access. He struggled to recruit staff. He really risked his personal wealth to launch this channel with barely any runway to keep it going. He later said in one of his books, he stayed just one step ahead of the bankers. And at first, CNN, as you all were talking about, was U.S. oriented. He dedicated the channel to America at launch. But then with the launch of CNN International, he was able to connect the entire world. I remember about 18 months into CNN, Ted learned that Fidel Castro was a loyal CNN viewer using a smuggled satellite dish in Cuba. And that was one of the moments where Ted thought, this can be bigger than just America. This can connect the world. So he started to cut those international distribution deals. And now let's flash forward here to 2026. CNN has changed hands many times. The brand has expanded in many ways. And through it all, this place has endured. And that's a testament to Ted as well. On this day of all days, we should say, he created something that outlasted him. Yeah. That's his immortality. It is his legacy. And for the thousands of people who work here, as we face another merger now set to be taken over by Paramount in the coming months, it's our obligation to carry that forward. That's what Ted always wanted. He always worried about CNN, even in his octogenarian years. He always watched. He still gave feedback, and I loved him for that. That is something, you couldn't take that love of the game, of the news, of the world out of Ted. And there's a lot we can learn from him today as we reflect on his legacy.
It was certainly the crown jewel in all of his accomplishments. And I love just hearing the backstory, Brian, from you of banks laughing at him, people saying, you can't do this, and him just saying, well, yes, I will.
Yeah,
and he did. And I remember when I was first hired at CNN more than 13 years ago, I told my colleagues where I was working at the time, they said, wow, you are going to work for the most iconic news brand in the world. And I think about that all the time, and that is all because of Ted Turner. So to continue honoring his legacy, I want to bring in former CNN anchor and Washington Bureau Chief Frank Sesno. Frank, how are you remembering Ted right now in this moment?
In many, many ways. As we've heard from Brian and Tom Johnson and others, Ted was a visionary. He was audacious. He didn't take no for an answer. He was called the mouth of the South once upon a time. And he had this idea to create CNN, a 24-hour news network, before America was cabled. I'm at George Washington University now. I work with young people and students all the time. They don't remember. They don't know who Ted was. And so I remind them there was a time when there was no cable television in America. And when Ted came up with this idea, he was laughed at. People will never pay for television. They won't pay for news. There's not a market for this. And he barged on anyway. At GW, we have now created an endowment. We have the Ted Turner Professor of Environmental Media. A lot of people contributed to this, including CNN, with the idea that we would continue Ted's legacy and teach future generations of storytellers committed to creative, bold, audacious storytelling, which is what Ted was all about. But what Ted did and what he created, it's hard to describe to somebody what it was like being in the room with him. When I was bureau chief, I remember a bureau chiefs meeting. We all came to Atlanta. We sat around this big table, and Ted was always Ted. And he said, I want to have a bureau in every capital in every country in the world. And that's what he believed, that if we covered the world, if we increased people's understanding of one another and other places, that the world would be more informed and a better place because of it. When I was at the White House in the early days, they didn't even, I remember calling the lower press office, and Wolf will laugh at this because he was a correspondent there too, but I would call and say, hi, it's Frank Cesano from CNN, and there was silence. Like they did not know in the early days what CNN even was. And I remember one day when I said, oh, it's Ted Turner's news network, and then they knew. So Ted's name and Ted's reputation preceded CNN, and through the force of will and imagination, and yeah, there was no money for CNN in those early days when he was starting it up, he created this incredible global brand that stands for everything that Wolf and others have talked to you about: news and information and people first.
Yeah, fairness and accuracy, as you heard Tom lay out in his conversation with him, and the news comes first, and he really lived by that and instilled that in those who worked for him, including our colleague Wolf Blitzer. He also was an environmental philanthropist, and I would love to hear more about his work in that area. Frank.
Yeah, Ted believed passionately in the cause of the planet. He created Captain Planet. Ted had several other channels, not just CNN, TNT, TBS, the Cartoon Network. All these channels were part of Turner Broadcasting, and Ted created. And he created a show that actually, if you talk to a lot of millennials today, they grew up on this show, Captain Planet. It was one of the first. It was a cartoon. It was an environmental cartoon that showed a very diverse group of people, heroes for the planet. Ted's daughter, Laura Turner Seidel, is chair of the Captain Planet Foundation. It continues its work. I've had the opportunity to take students out to Ted's ranches, the reserves they're now called, where they learn and they do stories from their ranch. So we've been to the one in Nebraska, and also to the Vermejo Reserve, which is in New Mexico. Now, Ted was, once upon a time, the largest single private landholder in America. He had all these properties, 2 million acres or so. I think he's now the second largest. But what happens on these places shows Ted's commitment to the planet. There is research on regenerative agriculture, on the forests, on the grasslands. You've heard that he's helped revive the bison herd. I mean, this was all Ted's thing. And I will tell you, it's very interesting when I think about all that we did at CNN, that I did at CNN, that we've all done and that CNN does. It's big. I mean, it's huge. But when I stood, and you can see in that picture there, he's on one of his reserves there with Christian and the bison behind him. When you stand on that property and you realize, oh my gosh, what has this human being done? What's he pulled together on behalf of conservation and all the rest? It's breathtaking. And so his commitment was complete. We did a lot of reporting on the planet. Ted didn't dictate ever the stories we did or what was in them, but he helped shape the focus or the subject area. And so a lot of the environmental reporting was because of Ted's belief in the planet.
Yeah, and just on the more personal level, in this statement from the family, it says he was also a man known for his no-holds-barred delivery, endearing sense of humor, and undying loyalty to those around him. He charmed people he met with his warmth and general lack of conceit, despite his many successes in celebrity, an attribute made apparent in his response to anyone who addressed him as Mr. Turner. He'd always reply, "Call me Ted." Frank, thank you so much for call me Ted. Exactly. Thank you so much for coming on to talk about Ted Turner. As we have learned, he has passed away at the age of 87. We're going to take a quick break. Stay with us.
This is CNN Breaking News.
CEO and president of Warner Brothers Discovery, David Zaslav, just released this statement, writing in part, "One of the moments I reflect on most often was meeting with Ted in Washington, D.C. following the close of the Warner Media and Discovery merger in April 2022. We talked about the opportunities and challenges ahead, the responsibility that comes with stewarding these extraordinary brands, and the need to keep innovating in a constantly changing world." I think about that conversation often. Ted's influence is woven throughout Warner Brothers Discovery. The brands he built and championed remain central to who we are, and they continue to reflect his belief in creative risk, cultural impact, and global reach. Through CNN, TCM, Turner Sports, and across our portfolio, his vision remains present in the work our teams do every day. Beyond media, Ted was a committed philanthropist who believed success should serve a broader purpose. He cared about journalism, culture, the environment, and future generations. And he acted on those values throughout his life. On behalf of our entire company, we extend our deepest condolences to Ted's family and to the many colleagues and partners whose lives and careers were shaped by his vision. It is our responsibility to honor and carry forward the legacy he built. Ted Turner changed our industry forever. I am grateful for his courage, his imagination, and the lasting mark he leaves on Warner Brothers Discovery and the world. And I know I'm speaking for you too, Wolf, when I say, but we will continue to carry forward his legacy and all of the values he instilled here at CNN that just endures and will endure. Wolf.
Forever, indeed. He was such a powerful, wonderful impact on all of us. I want to bring in the former CNN chairman and CEO Walter Isaacson right now. He's joining us on the phone. Give us a sense, Walter, what's going through your mind as we just learned in the last hour or so about the death of Ted Turner.
Thank you, Wolf. You know, I've studied innovators my whole life, but one of the greatest of all innovators was Ted, and it was partly because he was fearless. You know, he would try any new idea. He led us into the era of new forms of communication. But when it came to covering things, he knew CNN was built to be a fearless network. And I can remember, as you can, Wolf, on 9/11, when he came down into the newsroom, I went upstairs at CNN Center in Atlanta and got him out of his office, and he said, "This is why we built this network." And he gave one of the most inspiring rallying cries I've heard. And, you know, we just need his type today, people who don't fear power but want to cover it.
You know, there were so many moments when he dramatically inspired me as a journalist working for him, working for CNN. And I'll just share one of those moments and get your thoughts. Back in 2010, I was invited with Bill Richardson, the then governor of New Mexico, to go to North Korea, to Pyongyang, to try to bring some Americans home. And I went on that trip. I had never been to North Korea before. So here I am in Pyongyang. I'm staying in this little villa that the government there put us up in. And I have a TV in that room. I turn on the TV, and it's North Korean state television. Of course, I don't understand Korean, so I don't know what they're saying. But I'm flipping channels, and the only other channel that was on that TV in Pyongyang was CNN. And I'm watching CNN in North Korea. And I'm saying to myself, how did this happen? How did North Korea get to show CNN on this TV? And then later, I'm in the lobby, and I asked one of the people in the lobby, CNN was on the TV. He takes me outside. There's a little area, and there's a satellite dish there. And he says to me, "This is the satellite dish that Ted Turner a year earlier brought to Pyongyang, and we put it up here." He asked us to show CNN to the people in North Korea. It was very important to him to try to emerge a more peaceful world. And all of a sudden, North Korea, you could see CNN on the TV there because of that satellite dish that Ted Turner had brought to North Korea. And there it was right in the middle of this area outside this villa where we were all staying. And it was just a powerful moment to me to see how Ted Turner would often think about world peace, even with a country like North Korea. And people would be watching CNN in North Korea, and he was suggesting that maybe the world would be a more peaceful place if people all over the world would be watching the same news. And it just inspired me as someone who had been working at CNN the way he was so committed to world peace, to showing the people of the world news, educating the people of the world about what's going on fairly and accurately. And it just was a powerful moment for me. And I'm sure there were powerful moments like that with you in your connection with Ted.
You know, once I was in Bratislava in 1989 as the revolutions were happening in Eastern Europe. And I was in a hotel where they put foreigners, and one of the cleaning ladies said to me, the students like to come use the rooms in the afternoon because it's the only place where they can get outside television, and they like watching the music videos. And I said, fine, they can use my room. When I got back that afternoon, they weren't watching the music videos. They were watching what was happening at the Gdansk shipyards with Lech Walesa and the Solidarity Movement in '89 because CNN was carrying it. And I said, okay, these revolutions are going to spread because even governments that try to censor the news are not going to be able to block it. That was the type of vision that when we were at Time Magazine, we made him Person of the Year because that vision of what CNN could be wasn't just about television. It was about international affairs and a global society.
It really is a sad moment for all of us knowing that Ted Turner has now passed away because he was such an inspiration to so many of us, and he created this cable news network that really changed the world. When I went to the then Soviet Union, the Soviet Union was about to collapse, and I did that first interview. I just got to Moscow from Washington with Air Marshal Yevgeny Shaposhnikov, and he was doing a powerful live interview on CNN with me. He was speaking in Russian. We were doing simultaneous translation. And at one point, I said to him, why did you decide to give your first and only new interview? He was about to become the defense minister of the Soviet Union, to CNN and me. He said, because we were so grateful to CNN for showing the world what was going on in the weeks and months leading up to the collapse of the Soviet Union. And we wanted to underscore that commitment, that appreciation of what CNN was doing that led to this moment, the collapse of the Soviet Union, the creation of a new Russia. And it was just a very, very meaningful moment to hear Yevgeny Shaposhnikov, the Air Marshal, the now defense minister of Russia, say that to me live on CNN during this interview. It's just one of so many moments in my career at CNN that what Ted Turner did inspired and made the world a better place. And I'm sure, Walter, you have thoughts along those lines as well.
Yes, I think the entire revolutions that happened in the 80s were largely communication-driven. In fact, that's true throughout history, whether it's Gutenberg doing movable type or the Internet. When you have satellite television that transcends borders, it can truly change things. And you and I remember well during the very first Gulf War, the very first Iraq War, Bernie Shaw and others, they're covering war live. Now imagine that. When you're covering a war as it's happening live, Heisenberg had the principle that when you observe a particle, you affect either its motion or its position. Just that sort of a Ted Turner effect, that now everything that happens in this world is happening live globally.
It was really an amazing moment, especially for those of us who were covering that first Gulf War, seeing our reporters, our camera people in Baghdad risking their lives. The bombs were coming in, and they were reporting the news, and the whole world was watching. Thanks to CNN, all these countries were just dumping out of their own coverage and taking CNN's coverage. It was just such a powerful, meaningful moment for all of us. And Ted Turner really created that moment, and he deserves so much respect, which he's getting right now, obviously, now that he's passed away. And it's just a sad moment.
I hope that his passing and the fact that he was such a visionary can remind those in the media, those of us in the world, those of us, in society, that we are all connected, that there was a time when we didn't all go down different silos of information. We didn't have information systems designed to enrage us, but they were designed to inform us. And, we're at a 250th of America. It'd be nice to say how do we get back to that common ground we used to have of information systems and of a cable network like Ted envisioned that was going to cover the world?
And he was a great father, a great grandfather, a great grandfather. Loved his family so much. I saw that when I went out to Montana, spent some time with him at his ranch. I saw it when I was down in Atlanta, and he would invite me to have lunch or dinner. It was just that I heard his stories, and for me, they were all so meaningful, so important, so powerful. We will all miss him so much. Walter, thank you so much for your thoughts. We really appreciate it.
We will miss him desperately, and he loved you, Wolf, so thank you for having me on.
Thank you for joining us. Appreciate it very much. And let's begin this new hour of our show with breaking news.
This is CNN Breaking News.
And it's news that really tugs at the heart of the entire CNN family here in the United States and around the world. Ted Turner, the philanthropist, the media visionary who founded CNN, has sadly died at the age of 87.
Colorful, brilliant, and often brash, he was a force of nature by all accounts and devoted his vast resources to make the world a better place. Wolf looks back at his remarkable legacy.
He broke every mold. He changed the world.
Known as the Mouth of the South and Captain Outrageous, Ted Turner built a media empire that changed cable news forever.
I didn't have any upper limits to how far we could go.
Champion, philanthropist, environmentalist.
I don't know how to quit. It's not in my genes.
But growing up wasn't easy for Ted. Born in Cincinnati, Ohio in 1938, his parents sent him to boarding school when he was just 4 years old.
I didn't like boarding school. I wanted to be home.
Ted's little sister, whom he adored, died of lupus at 17. About 2 years later, Ted dropped out of Brown University. He'd been studying classics until his father cut off the money.
He thought I was wasting my time.
So he went to work for his dad's billboard company. But tragedy struck again when his father killed himself.
He went against everything that he taught me, you know, to be courageous and hang in there.
Ted took over the family business and coped with the loss by working even harder.
He said, set your goals so high that you can't achieve them in your lifetime.
When Ted wasn't working, he turned to the sport he loved, sailing.
We gotta go fast as we can here.
And won the sport's top race, the America's Cup.
I had worked very hard. It took me a number of years to become a champion.
He put that same drive into expanding the business. In 1970, Ted bought a struggling TV station.
It was a broken down UHF television station in Atlanta. He was going to transform UHF television into this new world of satellite television.
Ted renamed the station WTBS, and it became the country's first superstation.
What Ted made happen was just as important as the internet revolution of the 90s and 2000s.
But starting out, Ted needed content. He bought the Atlanta Braves and broadcast their games nationwide.
The Atlanta Braves.
The Braves became America's team.
When we bought them in 1976, they were terrible.
By 1995, Ted and his team were World Series champs. As he built the superstation, he set his sights even higher on a 24-hour news channel.
I worked till 7 o'clock, and when I got home, the news was over. So I missed television news completely, and I figured there were lots of people like me.
People did look upon that as a foolish idea that was destined for failure, but they underestimated Ted Turner.
Most of the leaders of the world thought Ted was nuts.
We sign on June 1, and barring satellite problems in the future, we won't be signing off until the world ends. We'll be on, we will cover it live. I dedicate the news channel for America, the cable news network.
Take 11, Mike Kewum.
CNN aired its first broadcast on June 1st, 1980.
Good evening, I'm David Walker.
And I'm Lois Hart. Now here's the news.
It took 5 years to turn a profit.
I lived for 20 years in my office.
He was one of us. I mean, he would be in his house coat down having breakfast in the Hard News Cafe.
And we'll get better by the end of the week.
Critics called it chicken noodle news. But the Gulf War would give CNN the respect it deserved.
You're going to hear the bombs now. They are hitting the center of this city.
It was the first time a war was broadcast live on television, and it was only on CNN.
I still believe that was the greatest scoop in the history of journalism.
You can see her there.
Ted didn't care as much about ratings as he did about being the most trusted name in news.
Ted also cared about the world. Over a 10-year period, he donated $1 billion to the United Nations.
I'm no poorer than I was not 9 months ago, and the world is a lot better off.
And he expanded his empire, launching networks like TNT and Turner Classic Movies. In his personal life, Ted was married and divorced twice with 5 children before he finally met his match, Jane Fonda.
She agreed to have dinner with me. For me, it was love at first sight.
I can't ever forget the reasons that made me fall in love with him. I've never met any human being that thinks the way Ted does.
Ted was a visionary, a titan, even Time Magazine's Man of the Year. But in 1996, he sold his networks to Time Warner. He got almost $8 billion.
I said, Ted, if you sell, you will no longer be captain of your own ship.
Ted Turner. Ted.
5 years later, Time Warner merged with AOL, and Ted was out.
Ted used the description, I've been fired. Ted got shafted, and it hurt.
It was more than just a company to me. It was a way of life.
He lost his empire and the love of his life. After 10 years of marriage, he and Jane parted ways. But you love her still?
Yeah.
To this very day?
To this very day.
But Ted never gave up. His final act, saving the planet. He created the UN Foundation and the Nuclear Threat Initiative. On his Montana ranch, he made it his mission to save the bison.
Hi. Well, you never go home, do you?
Yes, I know.
And he opened restaurants to ensure their survival.
Ted's love of the outdoors has made him perhaps the #1 environmentalist that I've ever known.
Before his 80th birthday, Ted revealed he had Lewy body dementia, a progressive disease. He spent his final years treasuring private moments, his ranch, and his family.
He wants to know that when he goes out, it will be with the love of his children and grandchildren.
You can never take away what he created and what he did.
We have never seen a man quite like Ted Turner before on this planet. And I don't think we'll ever see another one like him again.
Truly one of a kind.
He really was, and our deepest, deepest condolences to his family and to his friends. He was a very, very special man, as we say. May he rest in peace, and may his memory be a blessing.
And Wolf, I know this is emotional for you and others who came to CNN at the very beginning. And one of those people is, of course, CNN Chief International Anchor Christian Amanpour. You were an early hire here at CNN, and you quickly rose up the ranks, Christian, to become the international correspondent. Tell us more about the impact Ted Turner had bringing CNN global.
Well, I think that is the other side of his story. There's the amazing American success story, the businessman, the visionary, the revolutionary who created really a media revolution. And you know, every single thing that followed him, anything in the 24/7 genre started with Ted Turner. Everything was a copy, if I dare say so myself, and not the best copies. He was the original. And he made us all proud, and he made us all hopeful, and he made us all strive for his vision of a better world, whether it was in news or whether it was in the philanthropy. He was the first of the modern day philanthropists after the Carnegies and the Mellons and the Rockefellers of their generation. As Wolf just pointed out, when he gave $1 billion to the UN Foundation, and then Bill Gates, and then Warren Buffett, and then Michael Bloomberg, and all the others joined in to follow in that incredibly noble pursuit. He was big, huge on climate, and that's a global issue, obviously. He was way ahead of the curve on climate and climate mitigation. And I remember asking him in one of my last interviews with him, what would you say to the young people who look up to you and who want to make their own first $1 billion? How would you suggest they do that now? And he said, climate, green technology, the green economy. He was so sure, and he was always so absolutely right. And as Wolf was saying, you know, he was somebody who believed in breaking down the barriers between peoples and between nations. I remember when I was still, you know, in 1980s in New York, and I was climbing up the ranks. I started in September 1983 in Atlanta. And I remember when he banned the word foreign, and I was absolutely devastated. I wanted to be a foreign correspondent like Edward R. Murrow and all those people. And he brought the word international. And it wasn't just a little thing. It was because he didn't want to drive, you know, a wedge into people by calling them foreign. And he didn't want to have separation. Imagine that kind of leader and what we're left with right now when everything's about, you know, weaponization of identities and beliefs and all the rest of it. He was exactly the opposite. When he took CNN International in 1985, what he did was not just be the first ever global TV 24/7 behemoth network, but he also chipped down the walls of state and authoritarian regulated media. So all these nations where the people could only see what they were fed by their authoritarian leaders, and I'm now talking about that part of the world, you know, he gave them something else. He opened their eyes to the rest of the world. And I thought that was absolutely fundamental. And he said to us when we were in the Gulf War, he said, look, I'm not going to force anybody to be in Baghdad, which of course was the enemy capital for the United States. We had been reporting in Saudi Arabia and around. And we also had distinguished ourselves as CNN, the reporters there in Baghdad. But when it came to the war, you had the president, you had the, you know, chairman of the Joint Chiefs, you had all these people call Tom Johnson, our president, and say, you better get your people out of Baghdad because it's going to be real and they might get killed. And Tom basically went to Ted and said what he had heard. And Ted said, look, I'm not going to force anybody. It'll be volunteer, but we must be in Baghdad. In other words, we must tell all sides of the story. And how incredibly important is that in today's world, when we tell all sides of the story, we can be accused of taking sides. No, we're telling all sides of the story without fear nor favor, whether it's in the Middle East, whether it's, you know, on climate, whatever it might be, whether it's in the United States and elsewhere. So look, remember when giants strode the world? Ted Turner was a giant, and he risked his life in many occasions, including in his, you know, swashbuckling sailor days, winning the America's Cup, but also the Fastnet race, one of the most dangerous ever around the Isle of Wight. The race he won that year, there was more than a dozen people killed in a massive storm there. So he was brave. He was, I was going to say ballsy, but he was really. He said it like it was and like it is. And we were his willing foot soldiers. And I think he changed not just the world, but all of our lives too.
And I remember, Christian, when he all of a sudden, I see you on television for CNN in Saudi Arabia during the Gulf War, and I said to myself, Christian is risking her life. Those areas in Saudi Arabia you were going to be the targets of Iraqi Scud missiles, and you were there risking your life, but you were determined to report the news. I assume you were inspired by what you were hearing from Ted directly.
Yeah, look, I'm not going to tell you that Ted was my friend at that age. I was very, very junior, and I reported to Eason Jordan and Tom Johnson and the others, our immediate bosses and president of the network. But we always admired him. And I remember, and this is relevant, when I was in Atlanta at the beginning, and Ted, as he told you, used to sometimes stay in his office, which was above the shop. And indeed it was. And we would see him sometimes on the weekend come in to the newsroom in his, you know, his robe, his dressing gown and his pajamas to get his breakfast from the, what do you call it, the snack room. I don't know, he was putting money into the snack room to get crappy coffee and I don't know, you know, silly snacks and things like that. But that means he was there. We were always aware of Ted Turner. He didn't separate himself from the people and the masses who worked for him. He really was a presence. And I remember sometimes when he left, and of course, selling to Time Warner was great. It was a real publishing company. Time Warner was a great company. It was the disastrous sale and merger with AOL that started the, you know, the downfall, really. And Ted wasn't afraid. He would complain about what was happening to CNN. And I know some people think he whined too much. I'm like, no, he cares. I want him to whine. I want him to care. I want to work for somebody who absolutely cares and holds up this vision of truth and facts and going there and being people's eyes and ears and bringing unprecedented reporting. CNN has unprecedented reporting still from around the world. That is a Ted Turner legacy, and nobody else has it. And that's what we bring to the world. And, you know, he was always my inspiration. But in Saudi Arabia, to say, of course, we were on the US side, so we were not in immediate danger. But of course, had there been, you know, Iraqi, you know, big attacks, we would have been. But CNN sent 3 women to cover the Saudi side of the story. Remember, Saudi Arabia in 1990 was very anti-women, very patriarchal, you know, all of that, and we managed to do it. And somehow Ted and Ethan and Tom didn't think there was anything wrong with sending 3 junior women to cover the buildup of American forces and the massive coalition of eventually 500,000 forces. It was Colin Powell's doctrine of overwhelming strength, and we saw it happen in the Gulf War. And that was a war, compared to the one that's going on now, that had a plan, that went to the UN, that had allies, that had an exit plan, and it was done and dusted, and it, you know, it happened. And the Iraq side was the stuff that history is made of.
Really, when I saw you in Saudi Arabia and the other women from CNN who were reporting the news from Saudi Arabia, I said to myself, this is CNN. Women, men, everybody gets involved, reports the news fairly and accurately, and do a great job risking their own lives in the process. It was just an inspiring moment for all of us who were at CNN to see you, Christiane, in those days. And all these years later, report the news as brilliantly as you always do. And I think I speak for all of our viewers. Thank you, Christiane, very, very much.
Yes, for sure.
Thank you, Wolf, and
Pamela,
thank you most especially to Ted Turner.
Yeah, definitely.
We're all here doing this because of Ted, and you talk about his presence, Christiane, and how you felt it. He was always around, kind of looming over you, and I can say even though he has passed away, his presence will live on here. And Wolf, I know, will continue to channel him and what he would tell you. The news comes first, right? CNN is the cable news network, and we have this tremendous responsibility moving forward to carry on the values that Ted Turner instilled here at CNN. I want to go now to someone else who knew Ted Turner and actually met with him before he started CNN. That would be Tammy Haddad, the creator and executive producer of CNN's Larry King Live. All right, Tammy, you were Larry King's radio producer and came to CNN with him to launch the show in 1985. Bring us back there.
Well, it's funny because you think about you're, such a successful producer. I booked Ted Turner. He's coming on our little radio show in the middle of nowhere in Crystal City, and he gets in the room and he pitches Larry King to come to CNN. The whole idea, as you've said so well, as Christiane said, was very new. But Mutual Radio said, well, wait, you have to pay us to use Larry King. So it was many years later, really in 1985, that it started. But Ted Turner looked at Larry and said, this is a guy that's entertaining. This is a guy that will complement the news. So we did cover news and also all the people and personalities. And that was the key thing about it. And I'm going to tell you, Pamela, we were the first ones to put Wolf Blitzer on the show when he was at the Jerusalem Post. You talk about Christiane Amanpour. We took a lot of chances. Most of the people you see on TV today started on shows like Larry King Live because Ted Turner said, go do it, get it out there. Let's see what's happening around the world. I remember one time he sent us to, he had this whole view of the global village. This was a line people didn't use then. The whole world can come together. Part of that was his obsession with the nuclear proliferation. It was something he worried about quite a bit. We had a dinner, Mario Cuomo, who was the most important Democrat at the time, the governor of New York, and he was trying to get him to sign this. You have to stop nuclear proliferation. But he sent us to, we went to Tokyo, we went to Hong Kong, because he wanted to show the world what the global village was. So it wasn't enough to just broadcast from around the world. He wanted to actually take us all out there. And I remember calling management and saying, I think Ted Turner talks about the global village we are around the world. Why don't we take calls from people around the world? And I remember leadership's like, why would we possibly do that? And there we are, calls from Riyadh, calls from around the world. Those things didn't happen then. And it was Ted Turner who was right there and wanted it all to happen and wanted to make sure that people were connected to what was happening in news.
Wolf, I know you were there, and Tammy mentioned that you first went on that show for CNN, and Ted Turner watched you and eventually hired you, and then
and loved him. He loved Wolf so much. Wolf, in many ways, you are CNN. You started it all. You people would come to you, and they believed in you. And what you've done in the last few weeks have again shown not just your value, but the importance of live news. And as our whole industry is changing and people are going to these clips online, there's nothing like what you're doing, what Pamela's doing, what doing CNN. And we need it, and we need it to continue. And honestly, God bless Ted Turner for opening the door. I was there at the beginning of Fox News. I was also at MSNBC, been around a long time. And I remember Roger Ailes saying, CNN goes live to go live. We don't have to do that. Well, do you watch Fox News now? They go live everywhere all the time because it was the great lesson that people want to see it with their own eyes.
And let me just point out, Pamela and Tammy, that when I was invited by Tammy and Larry King to come on Larry King Live to talk about the book that I had just written, The Territory of Lies, the story of the Jonathan J. Pollard spy case, I was invited. Harper and Row, my publisher, said, go on Larry King Live. It'll be good to sell your book. And the fact of the matter is, Larry kept me on the show for an hour, and we talked about it. We took viewer phone calls for an hour, and my book became a New York Times bestseller as a result. And as a result of that, the New York Times book review section cited it as one of the most important books of the year. And that's one of the reasons that Ted Turner eventually came to me and said, you want to be our Pentagon correspondent? And of course I said yes, and the rest is history. But it was Tammy and Larry who started that ball rolling when they invited me to come on CNN on Larry King Live, which was, and Tammy, correct me if I'm wrong, CNN's #1 watch show, 9 p.m. Monday through Friday, right?
The entire time, for sure. And also you remind me in 92 when we found Ross Perot. And if you remember at the time, like the idea that this, not a candidate, but a regular guy. Now, he was a best-selling author. People had tracked the book and how he had rescued his team from Iran. The fact that this individual person from Texas, not well known, could go on CNN, go on Larry King Live, and then catch fire. And that's what happened, just like with you, Wolf. People learned about these, not, the sophisticated thought leaders and all the great institutions around the world, but regular people who made news, regular people who all of a sudden were in an extraordinary situation. And at the time, it was a little controversial, I would say. Some of our friends in the newsroom, why does Larry King have this 9 to 10 o'clock slot when we should be talking about news? But we're talking about people in the news. Why do things happen? And of course, People Magazine, the entire industry's on it. And there's nothing more special than seeing people talk about their own story, as you guys do so well every day.
It's another example, Tammy, of Ted Turner having an eye for talent and being a visionary, putting a show like that on air that became #1, hiring Wolf Blitzer, who became an icon. I think it all just speaks to Ted Turner and his vision and just how relentless he was in pursuing his vision and making it come to life. Tammy, thank you so much for coming on to share your stories. And Wolf, I want you to be part of this conversation with Judy Woodruff, a former CNN anchor and current PBS NewsHour senior correspondent. Thank you so much for coming on. And as you reflect on Ted, I was reading part of your story. When you were first hired at CNN, you asked him about hiring a female journalist.
I did.
And so much of the through line we've been talking about is how Ted didn't care what societal expectations were. He had his own vision. He pushed the envelope. And he put women in positions at the time that you didn't see, right? he was ahead of his game then. Tell us about that.
Well, he was always, he believed that women should have every bit an important role as the men at the network. But the story you're telling is when Tom Johnson, who had asked me to join CNN as an anchor in Washington, took me, basically said, come to Atlanta, I want you to meet Ted Turner before this all finalizes. And the first question I had for Ted was, so tell me, what do you think about women journalists? How do you feel about women at this network? He said, are you kidding? I'm married to Jane Fonda. And it kind of put an end to the conversation, to that part of the conversation. But he believed in hiring women. I mean, Bernie Shaw, he brought Bernie on board at the in the very earliest days of the network. Bernie and I were co-anchors over my years at CNN. He wanted a newsroom that reflected the country. And as you've been saying with all these wonderful folks who've been talking to you the last few minutes, Pamela, he wanted people who cared about the news and put the news first. And those were the people he hired.
Wolf?
You know, I always was impressed, Judy, that our lead anchors at CNN were a woman and an African-American, Bernie Shaw, a man who was my mentor, who I loved very much, who helped me become a broadcast journalist, and I miss him. I deeply appreciate everything he did. But it was Ted Turner who gave you guys that opportunity, and he really changed the news business.
He changed the news business. I mean, I would go so far, Wolf, as to say he transformed the news business, because when cable came along, we hadn't had, as everybody here now knows, cable didn't exist before CNN. We didn't have 24/7 news. We didn't have international news. And Ted made that happen. It was his dream for the longest time. You all have been discussing it. He was determined, and Wolf, I mean, what people were calling CNN in those early days, chicken noodle news, you know, there's no way he's going to turn this fledgling operation into something significant. And he proved all the critics wrong. I mean, he was the one who literally made it happen. And I was honored to spend the years that I did at CNN.
Yeah, and we were honored to have you at CNN too, Judy. It was so great to see you and Bernie reporting the news nightly, every night, and doing such a great job. And I'm so happy that Ted Turner and Tom Johnson, the other leaders at CNN, gave you guys that opportunity to showcase your talents and do the amazing job that you always did. And it was just inspiring for me as a younger journalist in those days, oftentimes just getting started, learning a little bit about the business, to see how you guys were doing it. And it was just a wonderful, wonderful experience. And I just want to thank you because you helped not just me, but you helped so many other journalists get going. And it was just a great, great moment.
Thank you. And if Ted were here, he would be thrilled to see the Ted family around him, all the folks who he's brought together. You've been talking to Christiane. I saw earlier you were talking to Walter Isaacson, who of course he brought on at one point to run the news division. Rick Kaplan was another one. He brought the best of the best, and that's why we were all so privileged to work with him.
Yeah, Tom Johnson as well was on earlier.
That's right.
His respects. And as we learn more about Ted Turner and his legacy, it's clear that he was not afraid to take risks. And if anything, he looked at quote unquote failure as opportunities, right? Nothing would hold him back. Brian Stelter was on earlier saying that banks would laugh at him. Others said, you can never do this. And yet, look what he did. He built the most iconic news brand in the world. And he actually said this to Christiane during an interview, and I think that this is an important line. He said, you've got to be able to take some disappointment in life, too. Not always is everything going to go well, so you just have to roll with the punches when adversity hits you. And I think that speaks to so much of why he was so successful in his life. He never let anything bring him down.
No question, Pamela. And when you tack that onto the vision that Ted had, I mean, his vision was, I mean, he started out as someone in advertising. His father had the billboard business in Atlanta, and he started to add TV stations. But in those days, no one could even imagine what cable news would be. No one could imagine 24/7. But Ted had this idea in his mind, and he was determined to see it happen, to see it come to fruition. As you said, people made fun of him, the chicken noodle news, when CNN came along. But it was that determination and that vision coupled together that turned into the remarkable legacy of Ted Ted Turner.
Think how hard that must have been, right? This had never been created before. He is creating something entirely new, and everyone's saying, you can't do this.
But he was never a shrinking violet. He was the man who said exactly what he thought, for better or for worse. He got in hot water for that a good bit. But he was someone who, he was one of those people in life, and there aren't many of them, but we know a few in the world, who just, who bulldoze through, and they have a vision, they have a dream, and they make it happen. I think of Steve Jobs at Apple, and you could name others. Ted belongs in that pantheon of people who, as I think I said to Wolf a minute ago, who literally changed the news business. It wasn't just creating cable, it was changing it. It's today 24/7. I mean, who could have imagined instant news, the internet, social media? But Ted Turner really turned the corner in terms of where news was headed.
As I said earlier, he was ahead of his time in so many ways. Wolf?
And it was so interesting, Pamela and Judy, when I think about the way he not only changed the way people in the United States watch the news, but people all over the world. A little while ago, I was talking about my trip in 2010 to North Korea with Bill Richardson, the then governor of New Mexico. And at one point, he was meeting with the North Korean foreign minister. And I was inside with my camera crew, and we were taking pictures, shooting that meeting. And at one point, the foreign minister of North Korea looks out, he sees me. And remember, they could watch CNN in North Korea because Ted Turner had brought a cable, a satellite dish, so that people in North Korea could watch CNN. He sees me, and he says, Mr. Wolf, come here. And he knew who I was, which I was so impressed. And he said, Mr. Wolf. And then he said this, and it's all on camera. He said, you are as powerful as the President of the United States. And I said to him, Foreign Minister, with all due respect, I am not as powerful as the President of the United States. And then he said, you are as powerful as the President of the United States. You have Situation Room, and he has Situation Room, and only you two have Situation Rooms. You are as powerful as the President of the United States. He was watching the Situation Room, and it was just a moment that I'll never forget. And I credit Ted Turner for bringing that satellite dish to North Korea and for showing the world what CNN was broadcasting. And it was just a moment that underscored the power of CNN. It was just a really inspiring moment. I laughed about it, but it was an inspiring moment.
He didn't want any part of the world to be dark. He wanted news. He wanted transparency everywhere. Of course, we know that's not possible. There are countries that don't let the news be aired or be discussed. North Korea is certainly right at the top of the list, but of course there are so many other countries, and Ted was always fighting that fight. And I think his generosity toward the United Nations, which you all have also talked about this morning, speaks to that. He believed that problems couldn't be solved unless the world was open, unless there was this kind of transparency, and that story that you just shared from North Korea is emblematic of that.
Yeah, it was just a powerful moment. I laughed, but as I said, it was just inspiring knowing what Ted Turner had done in trying to make sure that people, not just in the U.S., but all over the world, were watching CNN. Let's take a quick break, resume our special coverage. Ted Turner, sadly, has passed away. We'll be right back.
This is CNN Breaking News.
All right, as we honor the legacy of CNN founder Ted Turner, who just passed away at the age of 87, I want to bring in former CNN News Gathering President Eason Jordan. Eason, you had quite a run here at CNN. You were here during the early days, during the Gulf War, which Ted Turner has talked about as really putting CNN on the map globally. If you would, take us back to that time when you were working so closely with Ted as CNN was covering Operation Desert Storm.
Well, Pamela, thank you, and my condolences go out to Ted's family and all of his friends. It was a rough and tumble time in the early days at CNN, even before the Gulf War. A number of us were making a minimum wage of $3.25 an hour, but Ted had grand ambitions, and they were helped by, of all people, Fidel Castro, who suggested to Ted Turner that Ted take CNN from a U.S. distribution network to a global distribution network, and that's why, because of that Fidel Castro suggestion, that CNN became a global network so early on in the process. But Ted was intimately involved in those early days and even lived in his office above the CNN newsroom and would come through the newsroom every morning at 4 o'clock to fetch coffee. But he was intimately involved in Gulf War coverage and everything else, and was just vital to our success.
And tell us a little bit more about that, because this was very risky for CNN correspondents and those who worked for CNN during the war. But Ted really held by the principle, the news comes first, and we have to do whatever we have to do to make sure that happens. Tell us more about that.
Well, Ted felt very strongly that CNN had to be there, wherever there might be, in the old Soviet Union or in China or North Korea, wherever he might be. And he wanted to make sure that the world could see CNN. And so when I heard Judy, or Wolf rather, talking about going to North Korea and North Koreans were watching CNN, that was a satellite dish that I gave to North Korea at Ted Turner's request. And we did that in Vietnam. We gave the first satellite dish to Chinese state television at Ted Turner's request. And so he was very bullish on global distribution for CNN and being a bridge builder and doing it in a way that was positive and uplifting and absent of vitriol.
As you reflect on his legacy, what more do you want our viewers to know about Ted Turner that perhaps they didn't already know?
He was just the best person at heart. Yes, he was outrageous and could really be quite provocative at times. And one little story about that, I was with him when he met Vladimir Putin in the year 2000. We were the first Americans, Ted and I, to meet with Putin after he was first inaugurated as president in the year 2000. And talking about being provocative, Ted Turner's request to Vladimir Putin was that Vladimir Putin sell Ted a nuclear weapon. Putin, taken aback in his Kremlin office, said, "Ted, why would I want to sell you a nuclear weapon?" And he said, "Because I need a nuclear weapon to blackmail the rest of the world into nuclear disarmament." Putin then showed us the door. The meeting was over. But it was typical of Ted's provocative nature and do-gooder ways. I mean, he really wanted to rid the world of nuclear weapons, and that was his sort of half-hearted, humorous way of doing so.
Yeah, we're showing video right now of Ted Turner meeting with Vladimir Putin. He met with leaders all over the world to create that bridge, as you talked about. Eason, thank you so much for coming on to share some of those stories. Wolf?
Thank you.
And Eason played such an important role in generating that kind of international viewership for CNN, which was so important and certainly, and indeed, and very often helped make the world a little bit better in the process. Eason, on behalf of all of us, thank you very, very much for all you did. Right now, I want to bring in somebody else who really helped CNN over many, many years, the former CNN Executive Vice President, Rick Davis, who's also a good friend. We worked very, very closely over the years. Rick, give us your thoughts, as you heard a little while ago, on the passing of Ted Turner.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Wolf. Like Eason, I want to express our sympathy to the Turner family for the gifts that they gave us, Ted Turner. I mean, right now, the CNN family, and particularly those of us who were there at the beginning, we have great sorrow, but we have great gratitude as well because of Ted's vision and what CNN has become, what TCM has become, TBS, TNT, all of it has brought together so many people to become part of the Turner family. We all had great careers, and our children and grandchildren owe a lot to Ted because of that. I have a lot of thoughts about what he's done as an innovator for the news business. One of the things I don't think has been mentioned yet was the Goodwill Games in 1986, which continued every 4 years. And this was this is what made Ted so unique. In 1980, Jimmy Carter boycotted the 1980 Olympics in Moscow because of the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan. In 1984, the Soviets and the Soviet bloc retaliated against the United States for the 1984 Olympic Games in Los Angeles. Ted decided that he had had enough of that, and he created the Goodwill Games to bring together the world, both the free world and the Soviet bloc, in the Goodwill Games in 1986 in Moscow, where I worked on behalf of CNN. And that showed that, you know, not only was he a sports mogul, a media mogul, but it was the first real act by Ted to show that he really was interested in world peace. I mean, we're all interested in world peace, but he was someone who did something about it. That was one of the first ones. Then, of course, as Ethan mentioned, his passion for nuclear disarmament, global threat initiative. When you think about his entree into becoming one of the great environmentalists and philanthropists, across the board, there are very few people who have that wide berth of experience like Ted to make an impact in so many areas of the world. And so, of course, we're talking on CNN today about his impact on the news business and the hundreds of news networks that have copied CNN's model. But to me, the great impact of Ted Turner's life is the legacy he leaves in sports, entertainment, world peace, and in so many other areas that we can look to him as a shining example of how we, you know, should be a better person and can make a difference.
And you're absolutely right, and it's important to remember it wasn't just news that he was so passionate about. It was sports as well. I remember, of course, over the years, he bought the Atlanta Braves, the baseball team, did amazing work there. And for many years, the NBA on TNT, his other network, was just such a powerful moment, especially for those of us, Rick, like you and me, who love basketball, baseball, football, everything he was involved in, whether the news, the sports, the entertainment. He did with a passion, with an excitement, and was so successful, and we are grateful to him. You want to give me a thought on that?
Well, you know, I think that one other aspect of Ted that we all can smile about on this very sad day is he was just so damn funny. I mean, he could make a room just roar with some of the comments that he made. Some of them were a little bit inappropriate, but some of it was just because he was a visionary and he, you know, was, you know, as a sailor, he would look up in the sky and see which way the wind was blowing. And I think that's the way he led his life, and we all benefited from it. I just want to tell one story that he told us, a small group. Tom Johnson would have lunches organized with Ted when Ted was in Atlanta over the last couple of years. We got him to tell a story about he flew into St. Petersburg with a group of executives, bringing them as guests to when St. Petersburg was hosting the Goodwill Games. He got in the car by a political official who named Vladimir Putin, the deputy mayor of St. Petersburg, who greeted him and said, "I'm going to be your escort, Mr. Turner." And he had his driver drive Ted into the city and said, we're going to drop you off at the hotel, and then I'm going to take you out to dinner. Somehow they got word that Putin's wife was in a car accident, and Ted is telling us this story. And she was rushed to the hospital. And Ted said, "Where are we going?" He said, "Well, I'm taking you to the hotel. My boss, the mayor of St. Petersburg, said, I'm supposed to stay with you, take you to the hotel, and then take you to dinner." And said, "No, we're not. you're going to the hospital, and we'll find our way to the hotel. And he told Vladimir Putin what to do at that moment, and that's what they ended up doing. I mean, he was a man of all seasons, and we all benefited from it. And it's a sad day, but I smile when I think of all the, really funny things that Ted did to make us laugh when we needed one.
He made the world a better place indeed. Rick Davis, thank you very much. Appreciate it very, very much. I want to continue the conversation right now with CNN presidential historian Tim Naftali. Tim, President George H.W. Bush was widely quoted during the first Gulf War as saying, "I learn more from CNN than I do from the CIA," end quote. Just how significant has Ted Turner's contribution to history, how significant has that been?
Well, Ted Turner was a larger-than-life figure who thought globally. And to paint a picture for you, Wolf, and my condolences, personal condolences to you and those who worked with Mr. Turner, paint a picture of the start of Operation Desert Storm, the operation to liberate Kuwait, which was occupied by Saddam Hussein's Iraqi army. George Bush, Barbara Bush, and Billy Graham were watching CNN to watch the start of the war. Not too far away, General Colin Powell was at the Pentagon watching CNN to watch the beginning of the war. In fact, Colin Powell wrote later in his memoirs that he was watching Bernard Shaw, Peter Arnett, and John Holloman like current day Edward R. Murrows. CNN was not just broadcasting to the regular public, us. It was sending information to keep world leaders apprised of what was going on. Indeed, in 1993, after the Iraqis tried to kill former President George H.W. Bush when he visited Kuwait, Bill Clinton sent missiles against the Iraqi intelligence headquarters in Baghdad. CNN had pulled its team out of Baghdad at that point. The U.S. spy satellite wasn't anywhere near Iraq, and so the White House contacted CNN, Tom Johnson, who contacted our people, or CNN's people in Amman, Jordan, who called acquaintances or friends in Baghdad. And the first news that Bill Clinton got, that the retaliatory strike against Iraqi intelligence for attempting to kill our president, former president, that first news came via CNN. I think what's important for our viewers today in remembering Mr. Turner is not just to think of this as an American story. I cannot imagine 1989 being the way it turned out if it weren't for the fact that the people striving for freedom in Eastern Europe could watch what their colleagues and allies were doing in other countries. The changes in the late 80s and the early 90s were brought to everybody by CNN. This was before the internet. Now there are so many platforms to get international news. CNN was really it in the late 80s and early 90s, and it's because of Ted Turner's global vision. I'm not suggesting that CNN ended the Cold War, but I don't doubt that it helped.
Yeah, I have no doubt either, especially when I went to the then Soviet Union and some of the top Soviet leaders were telling me and my viewers around the world how significant CNN's coverage was in bringing down what was then the Soviet Union. Tim Naftali, thanks very much. Always appreciate having you join us. Pamela.
And Wolf, as you know, condolences have been pouring in this morning. And as we remember, CNN founder Ted Turner, who died this morning at the age of 87.
Ted was a media maverick, a philanthropist, and a pioneer of cable TV news. Here's how he's being remembered by the people who knew him best as they've shared with us these last couple of hours. Listen to this.
I'm very saddened by it. I mean, Ted had become not just my leader, the chief executive to whom I reported directly for 11 years, but became really my very, very close personal friend. And I have to say, you don't use this expression too often, I guess, men to men, but I truly loved the guy.
I've studied innovators my whole life, but one of the greatest of all innovators was Ted, and it was partly because he was fearless. He would try any new idea. He led us into the era of new forms of communication. But when it came to covering things, he knew CNN was built to be a fearless network.
He changed the news business. I mean, I would go so far, Wolf, as to say he transformed the news business, because when cable came along, we hadn't had, as everybody here now knows, cable didn't exist before CNN. We didn't have 24/7 news. We didn't have international news. And Ted made that happen. It was his dream for the longest time. You all have been discussing it. He was determined. And Wolf, I mean, what people were calling CNN in those early days, chicken noodle news, there's no way he's going to turn this fledgling operation into something significant. And he proved all the critics wrong. I mean, he was the one who literally made it happen.
He certainly did. He was a really brilliant, wonderful man. Finally, this hour today, as we remember Ted Turner and his undisputed impact on the country and indeed the world, I want to emphasize how extraordinary he was as a person. He was devoted to journalism, real journalism, and that didn't change when he no longer owned CNN. He often called CNN his greatest accomplishment. I was able to visit with Ted many times over the years, especially at his Montana ranch. He said his father, who was so tough on him, but Ted adored him, taught him to always dream big. Here is Ted Turner in his own words, and from all of us here in the Situation Room, our deepest, deepest condolences to his family, and as we say, may his memory be a blessing.
He said, set your goals so high that you can't achieve them in your lifetime. I don't know how to quit. It's not in my genes. I worked till 7 o'clock, and when I got home, the news was over. So I missed television news completely, and I figured there were lots of people like me. It was more than just a company to me. It was a way of life.
We are honoring the life and legacy of the Titan who founded and built CNN, transforming how the world experiences the events shaping our lives as they happen. I'm Dana Bash. Let's go behind the headlines and inside politics.
This is CNN Breaking News.
And we begin with a profound loss for the CNN family. Our network's founder, Ted Turner, died today at the age of 87. Ted Turner was a pioneer. He didn't just build the first cable news network, he created the modern experience of watching history unfold live around the globe. From Space Shuttle Challenger disaster to the fall of the Berlin Wall, multiple wars, most notably live on-the-ground coverage from Baghdad in the first Gulf War, which was absolutely revolutionary. CNN's Wolf Blitzer looks back at the extraordinary life of a man who changed television news forever.
He broke every mold. He changed the world.
Known as the Mouth of the South and Captain Outrageous, Ted Turner built a media empire that changed cable news forever.
I don't know how to quit. It's not in my genes.
Ted got his start working for his dad's billboard company in his early 20s, but tragedy struck when his father killed himself.
He went against everything that he taught me, to be courageous and hang in there.
Ted took over the family business.
He said, set your goals so high that you can't achieve them in your lifetime.
When Ted wasn't working, he turned to the sport he loved, sailing.
We gotta go fast as we can here.
And won the sport's top race, the America's Cup. He put that same drive into expanding the business. In 1970, Ted bought a struggling TV station, and it became the country's first superstation.
He was going to transform UHF television into this new world of satellite television.
As he built the superstation, he set his sights even higher on a 24-hour news channel.
Most of the leaders of the world thought Ted was nuts.
I dedicate the news channel for America, the cable news network.
Take 11, Mike cue him.
CNN aired its first broadcast on June 1st, 1980. It took 5 years to turn a profit.
I lived for 20 years in my office.
You can see her there.
Ted didn't care as much about ratings as he did about being the most trusted name in news.
Ted also cared about the world. He donated $1 billion to the United Nations.
I'm no poorer than I was 9 months ago, and the world is a lot better off.
And he expanded his empire, launching networks like TNT and Turner Classic Movies. In his personal life, Ted was married and divorced twice with 5 children before he finally met his match, Jane Fonda.
I've never met any human being that thinks the way Ted does.
In 1996, he sold his networks to Time Warner. He got almost $8 billion. 5 years later, Time Warner merged with AOL, and Ted was out.
Ted used the description, "I've been fired." Ted got shafted, and it hurt.
He lost his empire and the love of his life. After 10 years of marriage, he and Jane parted ways. But Ted never gave up. His final act, saving the planet. He created the UN Foundation and the Nuclear Threat Initiative. He made it his mission to save the bison.
Hi.
And he opened restaurants to ensure their survival.
Ted's love of the outdoors has made him perhaps the #1 environmentalist that I've ever known.
Before his 80th birthday, Ted revealed he had Lewy body dementia, a progressive disease. He spent his final years treasuring private moments, his ranch, and his family.
We have never seen a man quite like Ted Turner before on this planet. And I don't think we'll ever see another one like him again.
Here with me now are 2 CNN greats who worked with Ted Turner, knew him well, Frank Sesno and Judy Woodruff. Saying that, I actually got the chills. Thank you both for being here. Frank, you started with CNN in 1984, so not long after Ted Turner founded this network. It's really, I think, hard to encapsulate the kind of impact he had because it was so vast and so deep. How would you describe it?
So vast and so deep. And it was CNN, and it was TNT, and it was TBS, and it was the Cartoon Channel, and it was programming on CNN, and it was programming. Captain Planet, right, was a show that if you go around and talk to millennials today, a lot of them say they grew up on it and gave them some of their first ideas of what the planet was all about and how you could be a hero and save the planet with a whole bunch of people who didn't look like you, right? There was some very, very interesting stuff that was going on there, and that continues to this day. When I joined CNN in 1984, it was not known very much. And I have this funny story. I joined as a general assignment correspondent. I came out of radio. I had a great face for radio, but they hired me anyway, probably because nobody was watching really at the time. And I got sent over to the White House. I remember calling the lower press office one day and saying, "Frank Sesno from CNN." And it's like, "What? What's CNN?" And they said, "Is this the phone company?" And the phone company at the time was C&P, Chesapeake and Potomac.
Oh my gosh.
And I said, "No, it's Ted Turner's news network." And that's how they knew. So it was always tied to Ted's persona, his ambition, his audacious nature. And it took a while before we made any money. Those first few years when I was here, there was no money for anything. And the tide slowly turned, and it became a global behemoth.
And Judy, you were the anchor of this program in its earlier and original existence, Inside Politics. I remember what huge deal it was that CNN snagged you. You were a big network star, and you decided to come to a cable news network. That was a big deal for us.
I don't know how much of a big deal it was.
But talk about that decision.
Well, I had been at PBS at the News Hour with Jim Lehrer and Robin McNeil for 10 years, and I ran into a very determined Tom Johnson at a dinner in Washington right after the presidential election in 92, and he was is a very persuasive person. He's now a very dear friend, and said, we want you to come to CNN, be part of this global news organization 24/7. It was tough because I loved what I was doing at the NewsHour and PBS, and later ended up going back there. But Tom was persistent, and the more he described the vision that Ted Turner had, and I got to sit down and talk to Ted.
What was that like?
In Atlanta. It was memorable. I'll tell the story. I've told it before, so forgive me if you've heard it. But one of the first things I wanted to ask him was, I said, I've been doing journalism for a while, but what do you think about women in journalism? How seriously do you treat the idea? He said, are you kidding? I'm married to Jane Fonda. And the subject was put to rest. But it was clear his vision, as Frank has said. I mean, we all made fun of CNN in those early days. It wasn't, how could you possibly turn this tiny little operation into something meaningful? And yet, after the Gulf War in 1990, Bernie Shaw, who was a colleague of all of us, beloved the late Bernie, he and I co-anchored Inside Politics for a long time. Ted managed to turn this into a significant player and, frankly, to change journalism.
So you mentioned the Gulf War. I'm glad you did. I want to play a little bit of what Ted Turner said about that moment, that event, the first Persian Gulf War, and how that really put CNN on the map.
I got up and I turned on the television, and I turned to NBC, and there was Tom Brokaw talking about the war. And I flipped over to ABC, and there was Peter Jennings sitting at the desk, talking about the war. And I flipped over to CBS, and there was either Dan Rather or Walter Cronkite, whoever was there, talking about the war. And then I flipped over to CNN, and there was the war. I missed the first shot, but not by much, maybe 5 minutes or so. And I said, I still believe that was the greatest scoop in the history of journalism.
And it's hard for people maybe now to really comprehend why that was such a scoop. And we can play, I think, some of the video of the Scud missiles, and Bernie Shaw and others were talking from there about what it was like. So it's hard to imagine because we all have our phones and things are happening real time and we're getting it in our pockets. But the idea of having live coverage during an actual war was unprecedented.
And I was at the White House then. We were counting that down, and we were contacted. Wolf Blitzer was contacted over at the Pentagon by people saying, "Get your people out of Baghdad. The bombing's about to start." And the conversations that Ted and Tom Johnson and others had were, "We're going to defer this decision to you." And as Ted said, being there, and Bernie famously saying, the sky is lit up with this. 1 billion people around the planet watch CNN because CNN's feed went to virtually every other network. And it put us in a completely different place. And it really was. It was the execution of incredible women and men at CNN to do that, and getting the 4-wire in there, which Easton Jordan helped to lead and to do. But it was Ted's notion and vision that made that happen.
And every newsroom was watching CNN. I mean, this was the network that years earlier people were making fun of. Every newsroom was tuned, had the TV screens on, as you do right now, tuned to CNN, because it was the only news organization with live coverage of what was happening. And Bernie Shaw, Peter Arnett, the other amazing journalists who were there in Baghdad really made history.
And I have to say that we saw it. It wasn't just sort of reporting the news, it was changing the way the world communicated. So I had people at the White House come to me and literally say, gee, we don't need the CIA anymore because we're getting information quicker across CNN because our cameras were on and we were taking it live. Yeah. So it revolutionized the way the world communicated.
Real quick, you are now at GW, my alma mater. Can you just discuss the scholarship in his name?
Well, it's
more than that.
So some years ago, I got together with Ted and several others, and we came out of that when Ted was first diagnosed with Lewy bodies disease, and I said, we need to remember him. We need to enshrine this work. And we went to work and we raised the money, and we now have the Ted Turner Endowment. The Ted Turner Endowment at George Washington University funds the Ted Turner Professor of Environmental Media. And we have an annual lecture in his name. And the Ted Turner Professor of Environmental Media will teach students to be storytellers forever, reflecting Ted's commitment to the planet, conservation, and environmentalism.
Amazing. I mean, his legacy, you've been talking about it here on CNN all morning, the planet, the environment, peace in the world, and the news media. And who knew back in those early days, Dana, that he would transform journalism as he has.
All right. Thank you so much. It is such an honor to have you both here to discuss this.
It's an honor to be here.
Incredible.
A sad moment, but an appropriate time to reflect on
and celebrate
what Ted created.
Celebrate.
And our hearts go out to his family.
Absolutely.
And up next, CNN Chairman and CEO Mark Thompson will be here to reflect on how Ted Turner transformed global news. Stay with us.
Does Ted Turner have any political ambitions, and would he like to be president of the United States?
I get asked that question from time to time, and I really think that I can make a greater contribution at the current time, certainly, by building up this global communication system. Right now, they can watch this program in Moscow, in Tokyo, in Australia, in London. I mean, we're being watched all over the world. This is the first global network, and I think that that I can perform probably as great a function in the media right now as I could there. You know, and then there's always the problem of getting elected, which is not easy by any manner of means.
We remember the life and legacy of CNN's founder, Ted Turner. And as we do, I want to bring in our current CEO and chairman, Mark Thompson. Mark, thank you so much for being here. You have been the head of CNN for about 2.5 years, but I know that you met Ted Turner many, many years before that. Talk about that.
Well, and what a complete legend he was and is. I first bumped into CNN Tiananmen Square, 1989, first Gulf War in the field. And they were doing, you guys were doing news in a different way. It was flexible, it was agile, it was fast. And I very quickly, you know, even before coming to America for the first time, got to know the story of CNN and Ted Turner. I only eventually met him, I think, in the 1990s when I was quite senior at working at the BBC in the UK, but with plenty of business in America and some business with CNN. And encountered the human being and this kind of absolute force of nature. Incredibly visionary. Just that clip you just played, the idea of the global news provider, which the BBC had sort of done before that with the BBC World Service, but the way he thought about it is going to be television. I can be more influential with that than I could be even if I was president of the United States. That is so future forward looking, and the impatience, the vision, the sheer drive. I mean, you know this because you met him many times as well. He was unique. He's a unique figure, and we've lost one of our giants. I said to my colleagues today, he's the giant on whose shoulders we stand today. And what he stands for: innovation, disruption. Don't just go with what you've always done. Try and think big, and be prepared to take very big risks to meet the moment, whenever that moment is. I mean, that I think has always been, I think, the true spirit of CNN, and we need to really embrace that again, I think, today.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I have been with the network a very long time. This is my 33rd year, but I started very junior, and by the time I maybe got into a position where I could really get to know him, he had left CNN, but obviously his legacy was so huge. But when I started, this network, Mark, was the way you're describing it, very scrappy. We were, you know, the Davids to the Goliath networks around us, and there weren't a lot of people, and we worked really hard, and we broke a lot of news. I would argue we still do that, but in a very different way. And what I'm curious about is your interactions with Ted Turner when you became the head of CNN, because I know that you went down and had lunch with him right when you started, and how he sort of connected his vision for CNN to what he saw you doing as you took over the reins.
Well, I mean, I mean, the first thing I just want to say is literally my first thought when I was offered the job of running CNN was to go and see Ted. I mean, just and to meet him, try and get his blessing in some way. You know, I mean, I wanted to you know, believe that I could be not a worthy successor. There are no worthy successors to Ted Turner actually, but do my best to keep his vision going and his spirit of disruption and change and risk taking. And so you know, that happened a few weeks after I started, and indeed we were in the throes of the terrible Hamas attack in early October 2023 on Israel, and the awful human consequences of that. So we were already in very, very big news at that point. And we had a great time. And Ted was, you know, at this point, not in great health, but knew who I was. I think remembered meeting me, and there you can see us right there. That's in a rather historic office he has down in Atlanta, which in some ways was the nerve center of the whole operation. And when we, you know, I always think when we did the debate which you moderated with Jake, the Trump-Biden debate in 2024, that studio is only a few yards from the place where CNN began. And I think the sense of the heritage and history of CNN, but also still, I hope, its questing spirit. And we've got very big challenges now with the future of media. We're having to break into new platforms and master it, even though we've got far fewer resources than many of our competitors. And I think that feels very familiar to anyone who's aware of the CNN history of the little guy who's a bit more resourceful and brave than the big players, and in the end can actually do a better job than them. So that's what we have to do again today. And I do think, I mean, I mention Ted every time I talk to my colleagues, pretty much every single time, you'll know this. I'm constantly evoking Ted, because I think that is the spirit that media needs now, particularly legacy media, given the enormous number of challenges we have and the fundamental changes in the way audiences want news. I mean, Ted's great insight is that the public, not just in America but around the world, they want news when they want it and when they need it, which is not you know, a part of like a network scheduler's convenient agenda. It's when the news happens or when they want to catch up. And that idea of news which is there when you want it, and nowadays on the device you want it, and it done in a way which is not overcomplicated, doesn't require too much of you. If you've only got a few minutes, it's still really useful. That spirit, I think, and the basic notion of CNN is as valuable today as it was in the early 80s when he launched it, except that the modality and the platform and how you reach people and the devices are now, there's lots of them, they're very different, they're evolving very rapidly, and we just have to discipline ourselves to accept that and respond to it.
Well said. Thank you so much for coming on and remembering the founder of this amazing network and the man who obviously did so much more philanthropically.
I mean, truly one of the greats in our industry, and irreplaceable and unique, and great sadness today, but I think what a life to celebrate as well. So everyone at CNN is thinking about Ted now. Everyone, by the way, at Warner Brothers Discovery, our parent company, my boss, David Zaslav, again, is you know, was talking to John Malone earlier today, and there's a real sense of sadness, but also pride in what he did, and just the pride of having known him a little bit.
Mark Thompson, thank you so much for coming on. Appreciate it. And up next, CNN's coverage of the Gulf War, as we've been discussing, it really put the network on the map in 1991. It was one of Ted Turner's proudest moments. Nick Robertson was in Baghdad. He's going to be on next to share some of his memories. Plus, as we go to break, some words from Ted.
I wish God had made us just a little bit smarter, you know, but smart enough to where we didn't go to war with each other and practice cruelty on each other. If we were nice to each other, that's the kind of world that I envision, and the world that I've been working for is one that where everybody helps everybody else out.
When Ted Turner first launched CNN on June 1st, 1980, there was some eye rolling and a lot of criticism and big questions about whether there was any way that a cable news network could compete with the big three networks, NBC, ABC, and CBS. Then came an iconic moment during the first Gulf War back in 1991, and it cemented CNN's role as a force to be reckoned with.
This is something is happening outside. Peter Arnett joined me here. Let's describe to our viewers what we're seeing. The skies over Baghdad have been illuminated. We're seeing bright flashes going off all over the sky.
Joining me now is CNN international diplomatic editor Nick Robertson. Nick, you are in Islamabad, Pakistan right now. You joined CNN in 1990, and you were in Baghdad at that time with CNN's Bernard Shaw, whom we just heard, Peter Arnett, John Holloman, Robert Wiener, Ingrid Formanak, Tracy Haberlin, Chris Minaj, and the legendary Mark Biello, cameraman, who I believe is his birthday today. That all happened. You were all together during that moment the world shared.
Yeah, and it was because of Ted, right? Because of his vision of what he wanted our CNN journalism to be. He inspired us because he wanted to get the news from the ends of the earth. He inspired us with his passion that, you know, if only we could tell the stories, we could bring people closer together, bring that understanding, bring world peace. And I think we all liked that. This was positive. And that's what had brought us there. And that moment and that broadcast we just had, that was all part of Ted Turner. We were broadcasting on a system that nobody had ever used in a situation like this before. It was an out-of-the-box idea. It was the legendary four-wire. But we came up with the idea, and through Robert Wiener, and through our bosses, Easton Jordan and Tom Johnson, and Ted at the top of it all, go do it. Spend the money. Be over budget, make it happen, bring this in, and that's what we did. And then we brought the satellite dish in after that, and that was all because Ted gave everyone the space and opportunity and vision to imagine and do big and do good. I remember when I was first hired by CNN, and I was just a young, wide-eyed engineer at the time, and I've been covering the fall of communism in Eastern Europe, the Berlin Wall coming down, and Ceausescu's overthrow in Romania. And the CNN was having trouble getting its engineers into Romania. I was working for somebody else, and they spotted me, and they said, after this, come over to us, come talk to us. And I remember it was my first time to the United States, and I'd obviously done a lot of research about CNN, and I got Ted's vision, and it was like, this is who I want to work for. This is where I want to be. And I walked into the Omni Hotel in the CNN Center on the evening of Friday, the 26th of January, 1990. And you know who is sitting with his family having his dinner in the restaurant? That was Ted Turner. I didn't really see him again. I was hired by the chief engineer the next day and back to London before I could turn around. And I don't think I saw Ted for 10 years or more than that. That was because we were going to the ends of the earth all the time to get the news. I met my wife because of Ted Turner. We were on the road together, working for CNN, going into Baghdad during the war. Ted gave us the passion, the commitment to do that, the inspirational things we did. I remember not long after Ted had passed John Johnson's pen to Mikhail Gorbachev, signing that letter. CNN did a broadcast from Red Square. No one had ever done it before. I'm sorry, it's a helicopter flying by. This was Ted's vision to do what no one, he said, the idea was go live in Red Square, but not just one camera, 4 cameras, build a stage in the middle of Red Square. And it was Ted's relationship with Mikhail Gorbachev that allowed that to happen and gave the space to do this news and bring cultures together, reach across boundaries, reach across borders. He inspired us to do that.
Yeah.
He inspired us to go to the ends of the earth. He also inspired us to go into the jaws of danger. And we did that, and we did that willingly because he gave us that sense of commitment for good. We'd be in danger in bad places, it was for a good reason.
And just real quick, when I first started here at CNN, we were not allowed to use the F word. And by the F word, I mean foreign. And that was a Ted Turner mandate.
And I remember that too. You couldn't say it in the newsroom. You know, if anyone said that, I think you had to put money in a jar, and obviously the money went to charity. there was a penalty for that. He so believed that it wasn't foreign; it was international. Mm-hmm. You know, and we bought that, and then you know when eventually we did start using that word again, like now, you sort of look over your shoulder because it was
exactly.
It was not it was a different ethos.
Yeah. Listen, Nick, I want to say thank you so much for joining us. Ted Turner always says the news is the star, and the news is still the star, and you have been breaking a lot of news from where you are in Islamabad, so I'm going to let you go and keep reporting on that. But thank you for coming and sharing your memory and the celebration of this man who did so much in this world, not to mention for this company. Thank you, Nick. And as I mentioned, Ted Turner always says the news is the star. So coming up, we're going to get back to the news that we cover on this show, politics, a huge political story. President Trump had some big primary wins in Indiana. Stay with us.
It's a historical trend. The president loses. I don't know why. It's unfortunate. But it's almost like not a resignation quite so much, but that it's not his name on the ballot.
Thank you all. Sorry it was an abbreviated panel, but coming up we're going to go back to the big story here at CNN that Ted Turner has passed away. But it wasn't just TV news where he made history. He helped preserve film history as well. I'm going to speak to the host of Turner Classic Movies after the break.
My favorite ex-husband created Turner Classic Movies. That was Ted Turner.
You were married to Ted Turner?
I was.
I didn't know that. It's amazing.
Yes.
When?
On our very first date, he talked to me all about Turner Classic Movies.
Is that right?
Yeah. And I do think it was one of the great things that he did.
That was, of course, the legendary Jane Fonda with, I would argue, the legendary Ben Mankiewicz, talking about Turner Classic Movies. Ben is my guest now. And Ben, thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate it because you are somebody who people turn to when they want to reflect, when they want to live in another time and era. And you're able to do that because Ted Turner created the network TCM.
Yeah, well, first of all, Dana, thanks for having me on. It's very important for us to share, as you have been, how important Ted Turner was. You know, two things he was definitely, Jane is right, that was just last Thursday, opening night of what was our most successful film festival ever, our 17th film festival in Hollywood. And, you know, we're not, I think Ted knew this was not merely a television channel. I mean, I'm an evangelist like he was for this place, but, you know, it's a repository of our shared history. You know, this is a place that night after night, day after day, reflects our dreams. And there's no other television channel that does that. I get it. There are maybe more important television channels, but I don't know that there's a specific channel that is this guardian of this cultural history that we have. And I think Ted understood that right from the start. He understood it.
Yeah, and I mean, the notion of preserving and putting out there classic movies, it didn't exist before Ted Turner thought of it, and that's a really important thing to know. You had a chance to speak with Ted on the 25th anniversary of TCM back in 2019. I'm going to play a little bit of that.
The word that gets tossed around a lot with you is maverick.
I don't know why. I don't really feel like I was a maverick.
You don't?
Nah. I just thought a lot. I was smart enough to think a lot and think things through very carefully. I knew 24-hour news was going to work, and I knew 24-hour classic movies was going to work.
When you say you knew, your gut told you.
Right. Well, that makes you different, don't you think? A little bit.
Yeah, I would say so. Just a little bit, Ben.
It was very hard in that interview to get him to take a bow. You know, he kept deflecting and deflecting, like, no, I just had an idea and I thought it would work. But obviously he had a really, he did have these senses in his gut of what would work. And, you know, back when he ran Channel 17, this local channel in Atlanta, he bought those old movies because they were cheap and he liked watching them. And I think it's a really good lesson. It's one that I have had my entire time at TCM, which is that if I think something's interesting, I'm kind of just like everybody else. I think they'll like it too. That's what Ted thought. I like these movies. There's no way I'm alone in liking these movies. And it turned out, of course, he was correct.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I'm here at CNN, and so we've been talking a lot about his legacy in creating this notion of cable news and this notion of 24-hour news, which was non-existent before he came up with it. But I did really want to talk to you about the legacy that you continue on, because film is another part of how we all connect as human beings, and the classic films even more so.
Well, it's you know, it's in my head a little bit, Dana, because on that opening night of our festival, again, I can't believe it was just 6 days ago, and we had Jane Fonda there to salute Robert Redford. She came because she wanted to talk about Robert Redford, to give you an idea of like how other actors feel about these movies, right? She thought it was important not to talk about herself, but to talk about his legacy. But she said shortly after springing it on me that her favorite ex-husband was Ted Turner. You know, she said that he understood that we need to know what it used to be like, right? How we used to live, how we used to behave, she said. And we need to know who the greats were, the great directors, the great actresses, the great actors, that matters. I mean, these movies, they're fictional stories, most of them, right? But they are, each one of them, good or bad, a little mini documentary of how people lived, how people spoke, how people communicated in that moment. And I think that's invaluable to us, whether you love the movies or not. There's a great bonus is that most of these are really just thrilling stories that you can lose yourself in and escape a bit from what you had in your last segment. Like, take a respite, not a full break, but take a couple hours off from talking about all the divisive politics in this country.
Yeah, and as you're talking about Jane Fonda, I'm thinking about something I've heard her say, which is, I used to sleep with Ted Turner, so I know CNN, as she makes her arguments for independent news continuing. Let me just play a little bit more of your conversation with Ted Turner.
All the movies in the library are 25 years older.
Yeah.
But they're more popular than ever.
How come?
Because people like old stuff. People do like old stuff. I'm old now, and people like me.
Classic. Ben Mankiewicz, thank you for being here. I really appreciate it, and I love the Citizen Kane poster behind you. I think we can see it. You're the best.
Thanks very much, Dan.
Thank you for joining Inside Politics today. CNN News Central starts right now.
And the passing of an American icon, CNN's founder Ted Turner dying at 87, a pioneer who lived an extraordinary life. We're going to look at his legacy as we follow these major developing stories and many more, all coming in right here to CNN News Central.
And still ahead, the White House's border czar takes a defiant tone as he vows that mass deportations are coming. See more of his message to critics of the administration's immigration policies. And then later, a look at the life and legacy of TV pioneer Ted Turner, who created the first 24-hour news channel here at CNN.
Collaterals, as the administration has referred to them before. Priscilla Alvarez, thank you so much for that reporting. Still ahead, Ted Turner, the philanthropist and media visionary who founded CNN, has passed away at the age of 87. We'll take a closer look at his remarkable life and legacy when we come back. Ted Turner, the media mogul who founded CNN and revolutionized TV news, has died at the age of 87. A release from Turner Enterprises said he passed away peacefully today, surrounded by his family. The Atlanta businessman, known for being brilliant and brash, built a media empire consisting of other popular TV networks like TBS, TNT, and the Cartoon Network.
He was also a huge philanthropist. He was also the owner of several professional sports teams. Our colleague Wolf Blitzer had a close relationship with Ted, and earlier today Wolf spoke about some of the impact that Turner had on him.
He hired me back in 1990, and I remember he told me when he hired me, remember, we're the cable news, capital N, capital E, capital W, capital S. We're the cable news network. This is where the news comes first, and your vacations and everything else comes second. So he was so determined to make sure that the news was strong, was reliable, was fair, and he inspired me and so many other journalists to work and report the news fairly and accurately, and if possible, break those stories first. It was just so. I saw him a few months ago in Atlanta, and we had lunch, and it was just so painful to see how he had deteriorated his health over the years. Because a while earlier, I went out to Montana, spent some time with him at his ranch out there, and it was a very different kind of Ted Turner at that time. Yeah. But it was just painful, and we're going to miss him. I'm going to miss him a lot personally because of all the wonderful things that he did.
CNN's Brian Stelter is joining us now with more on his life and legacy. And Brian, Ted meant so much to so many people. He lived such a long life. How's he being remembered?
Yeah. Well, so many words come to mind, but he's remembered as a maverick, as a risk taker, as a renegade who wanted to revolutionize the media and really truly succeeded. You know, let's try to picture the TV environment of the 1970s. You had the big three broadcast networks, NBC, ABC, CBS. You had a new premium channel called HBO, but that was about it. ESPN was just being born. These brands that we now all know were just starting to be conceived. And Turner saw this huge opening in the news space. He believed the broadcast networks were failing America by only having half-hour-long newscasts. He believed there was a space for 24/7 news. He looked at market research and said there was very little demand for something like CNN, and he rejected that. He said, you have to give it to people. You have to provide the supply, and then there will be the demand. And he was proven right in such an extraordinary way. And, you know, he did it partly out of his own business instincts. He wanted to grow his father's billboard business into something really huge. So he was expanding into film, into television. He was buying up old movies to show on cable. But CNN, more than anything else, was his way of establishing himself and then eventually becoming a billionaire. You know, Turner believed in people. He believed in the citizens of the world. He believed in the United Nations. He believed in great global problem solving. He believed that something like CNN could help connect the world. And then, as he became ever more rich and successful, he gave away so much of that money through philanthropy to the UN, to the foundation, and by buying up great swaths of land in the American West. He always recalled that old line from Gone from the Wind, Scarlett O'Hara, right? Saying, the only thing that matters is the land. He believed that as well, and that's one of his many legacies today.
And Brian, what are you learning about his final days, how he spent them?
Well, you know, Turner's health had been declining for quite some time. I had heard in recent days that he had transitioned to hospice care. He lived for almost a decade with Lewy body dementia, but even as recently, the last few years, he was still fly fishing, you know, into his 80s. He was on Zoom, on FaceTime, talking with friends as recently as a couple of weeks ago. And his large family was able to gather at his bedside in recent days. He's survived by 5 children, 14 grandchildren, 2 great-grandchildren. There's going to be a private service, but in the future, the family says they're also going to plan a public memorial down the road.
And he obviously did many things, but CNN to him was very special, Brian. Tell us about his special relationship with CNN from the beginning through to recent times.
You know, I think it was the fellow media mogul John Malone who said CNN was his most beloved property of all. And once Turner parted ways and sold CNN and the rest of his Turner assets, he regretted selling CNN. He had lots to say about that over the years. And he was always pushing CNN to be the best version it could be, with the news coming first. That old line from the 80s, the news being the star. Right? I think we have a clip from the very first newscast. It's interesting to watch on a day like today. This is from June 1st, 1980.
Take 11, Mike Q. To New York.
Good afternoon from the World Trade Center.
Stand by, ready 3, take 3, Mike Q. 3, start to slow zoom in a little bit. Roll tape, take 3. Ready 13, full. Ready camera 3, 1 center up.
Good evening, I'm David Walker.
And I'm Lois Hart. Now here's the news.
Right to the news. No drama, no fuss, just right to the news. And I remember interviewing Dave Walker a few years ago. He said to me, the major concern was about whether we could fill 24/7, whether there was going to be enough news. He said, as it turns out, we could. There was more than enough news. And this started in America, but it's also worth reflecting on how it grew all around the world. There were so many doubts in 1978, 1979, 1980 about whether there was going to be a market for CNN and whether there was going to be enough news to fill all the time. But once it launched, it quickly caused others to try to launch rival services. It created a total disruption in the marketplace, and not just in the US, but around the world. Yes, there are other cable news channels in America, but now there's hundreds of versions of this 24/7 news concept in various countries. And thanks to CNN International, Ted Turner and his colleagues were able to build something that is going to long outlive Ted. This is something that is his, I think, ultimate legacy, that we, all of us, are here, the three of us, talking on his air even today.
Certainly. Brian, thank you so much for that. Brian Stelter, we appreciate it.
Ballroom blitz. Republicans pushing a massive funding bill that includes $1 billion for security tied to President Trump's White House ballroom project. That sets up a high-stakes fight on Capitol Hill. We'll get you the details on that. Also, a business legend and an American icon. From CNN to sailing, baseball, and his passion for the environment, we examine the remarkable legacy of Ted Turner as we follow these major developing stories and many more, all coming in right here to CNN News Central.
He's the man who pioneered the 24/7 cable news landscape, and today we're learning that media legend and founder of CNN, Ted Turner, has died at the age of 87.
Before Turner revolutionized the way Americans got their news, he dipped his toes in the world of sports, investing and acquiring the rights to the Atlanta Braves baseball games and eventually buying the team. Turner would also become owner of the NBA's Atlanta Hawks and NHL's Atlanta Thrashers. Joining us now is a man who knows all about the significant impact Ted Turner had in the world of sports, Hall of Fame sports broadcaster and host of Inside the NBA, which had become a major success on TNT before moving to ESPN, Ernie Johnson Jr. Ernie, thank you so much for sharing part of your afternoon with us. Talk to us about your relationship with Ted and how you were remembering him today.
Well, it's kind of, I would say it's a melancholy kind of day here. It's gray. The skies have turned gray here in Atlanta, and it's a day of reflection, really, for me, because I think back to 1989, and that was the first day I ever walked onto the Turner Studios property, and it was just the mansion that's down here. We have this sprawling campus now, but I remember walking in there and saying, this is Ted's place, and now I'm part of it. And so it's that kind of a feeling, you know. It's been a long time since he's had, you know, direct involvement with the company, and you know the way things go these days with acquisitions and mergers and all that stuff. But deep down in here, I'll always be Turner.
Yeah, we hear you, Ernie. And he played a big role in your whole family. I think it's worth noting. Your father was actually the announcer for the Atlanta Braves, which was a much more humble institution when Ted Turner bought it, right? And ultimately created the superstation TBS. Can you tell us more about what he did for the Braves?
Yeah, well, I think that what he did back then really has set the standard for what we're doing these days, how we watch live sports. I mean, it was his vision to say, hey, number one, he bought the Braves so we could put the Braves on TV. So it was programming time, okay? So there was an agenda there, because he wasn't a big baseball guy. But but the Braves were on TBS, and then it was like, well, we used the satellite to beam them all over the country, and the Braves became America's team. And so my dad, as one of the announcers, became known, from coast to coast, because the folks would just watch the Braves, even if the team wasn't that good. But it was like, wow, we get to watch somebody else's team. That's awesome. So he really was a pioneer and a groundbreaker in that regard. And then I guess to prove that he was, a baseball guy to an extent, he was actually the manager for a day. He took over for Dave Bristol and put the uniform on. And I think, as I recall, he was like, he even tried to, some tobacco because the players, and so he was doing that. And he also made the games fun. There was a little bit of a Bill Veeck quality, the old Chicago owner who used to do all kind of crazy stuff. And I remember there was a contest between a few guys who could roll a baseball up the first base line to first base and win that race. And Ted came out with all kind of scrapes on his nose, but he won the race. And that was the kind of guy Ted was, from America's Cup as a sailor when he was he became legendary, to anything really that he wanted to get involved in, he wanted to win in, and he did.
What's your favorite personal memory with Ted, as someone who watched, this project grow to the heights that it's reached from the inside?
Well, I mean, there are a few, and I don't want to give you the impression, oh yeah, Ted and I were tight, we hung out all the time. No, but I can remember being at Braves games and sitting down there right behind Ted and Jimmy Carter for Braves playoff games, and the vibe there was unbelievable. The Goodwill games, it was his version of the Olympics. Sitting on a beach in Australia with Ted doing a segment there about what the Goodwill games meant to him and how they were continuing. That was back in 2001. And then there was just this very human side of him. You'd see him leave the ballpark in just your ordinary car. He'd be caught in traffic just like everybody else. And in those days when our offices were at CNN Center, it wasn't uncommon to see him and Jane Fonda walking through the atrium at CNN Center just like they were anybody else. So he was an everyman to me, but a guy who had this intense drive. I always considered him an underdog, you guys, that he was going to do these things nobody expected, and he would do it with this gut feeling that it was the right thing to do, and that he would consider all of the options and all the analytics, and then his gut would tell him what to do, and it served him well.
And no doubt that fight in him, that spark in him, will be his legacy. Ernie Johnson Jr., thank you so much for sharing that with us. We appreciate your time.
No, thank you guys for having me. I really appreciate it. And you know what I'm going to do tonight? Before we go on the air, my dinner tonight will be a bison burger from Ted's Montana Grill.
I love that. I love that, Ernie. All right, Ernie, thank you so much. We'll be right back.
Facing a hantavirus outbreak as a fight now builds over the port the ship was just told it could dock at. And he was a CEO, a sailor, a sportsman, and an American icon. CNN founder Ted Turner has died. We'll take a look at his legacy as we follow these major developing stories and many more, all coming in right here to CNN News Central. We start this hour with breaking news in the Oval Office. Here's President Trump taking questions from reporters. Today, CNN lost the visionary who created the network more than 40 years ago. Ted Turner was 87 years old, and the broadcasting pioneer didn't just build the first 24-hour news network. He launched the modern experience of watching history happen live around the world and beyond from the Gulf War to humankind traveling to the far side of the moon. Here's Turner with more on what drove him to create CNN.
He said, set your goals so high that you can't achieve them in your lifetime. I don't know how to quit. It's not in my genes. I worked till 7 o'clock, and when I got home, the news was over. So I missed television news completely, and I figured there were lots of people like me. It was more than just a company to me. It was a way of life.
CNN is far from the only major organization paying tribute today. Turner also owned multiple sports teams, including the Atlanta Braves, when they won the World Series in 1995. And the Braves posted this on social media saying, quote, "Our good friend and former owner Ted Turner was one of a kind, a brilliant businessman, consummate showman, and passionate fan of his beloved Braves. Ted's visionary leadership and innovative approach to broadcast television transformed the Braves into America's team. Under his stewardship, the ball club experienced one of the greatest runs of sustained excellence in MLB history and brought a World Series championship to Atlanta in 1995. It goes on to say that Ted was also a legendary philanthropist and that he will be missed. We're joined now by one of the MVPs of the Atlanta era. Dale Murphy, a former Braves All-Star, is with us. He's also a two-time National League MVP. Dale, thank you so much for being with us. Tell us about your experience with Ted while playing for the Braves and what it was like under his ownership.
Well, I think all of us that got to play under Ted's ownership are very grateful. He was, as we learned from his experience in sailing, he got the nickname Tenacious Ted, and he passed that on to us. He expected us to be tenacious in every way. He took care of us as players. He wanted to beat the Yankees and George Steinbrenner. He wanted to beat the Carpenters, go in the Phillies, and it was a personal thing to him. I think, we recognized early on that he was going to change. Things were changing as far as viewership was concerned. He put us on every night, no blackouts, even in Atlanta. And as a result of that, created America's team, as you mentioned. And it just formed a whole generation and beyond as baseball, their love of the Braves from grandparents to parents to kids. It's just continued to grow and develop. But in those early days of TBS, we could tell that something special was happening, and now you can see the result of it. Everywhere I go in this country, there are Braves fans because Ted put them on TBS, and there we were. So we were very fortunate to be there in the early days.
Yeah, and before those huge runs in the 90s, things weren't as great on the field, right? There was a 16-game losing streak at one point, and Ted actually appointed himself manager, even though it only lasted a day. What do you remember from that?
Well, I was actually in AAA at the time. I got called up after that, but I remember Phil Niekro telling me that Ted came up to him before the game that he was going to manage, and he asked Phil Niekro where he wanted to hit. Now, back then especially, it was pitchers always hit ninth because they weren't the best hitters; they were pitchers. But before the game, Ted said, "Hey, Phil, where do you want to hit?" And Phil said, I think I better hit ninth, Ted. I'm pitching today." So it was, he just felt like Dave Bristol needed a break. It was a tough time, and he was never shy from doing things. I think, he changed the game. He should be recognized for growing the game like no one before him and like no one else ever has. He put the game of baseball and Braves baseball everywhere. And everywhere I go, like I said, there are people that are passionate Braves fans because of what Ted did. So he was a visionary there in sports broadcasting, not only as has been mentioned time and again, his vision as far as what we're speaking on right now,
right.
CNN, as a philanthropist, as an environmentalist. He just was a visionary.
Dale, what is your favorite personal memory with Ted?
Well, I learned how tenacious he was as far as a negotiator was concerned. My agent and I decided to go in to talk to him personally about my next contract. I'll just say it was a little intimidating. He wasn't happy about our offer. He got the only thing I remember is he laid down on the couch in his office. He goes, "Okay, Murph, hit me with the bad news." And we offered what we thought was a pretty fair deal. And all I remember was he said, "What?" and stood up and left the room. And he was intimidating for sure. And but he treated me fairly. He wanted to win. He was generous to his players, tough negotiator. But he wanted to win. We all know that. It wasn't a joke. He wasn't goofing around with this. He had some interesting marketing ideas and things like that. But he was serious. He wanted to win the World Series, and we could tell that. We're lucky to have played for Ted Turner.
And he certainly won quite a bit. Dale Murphy, thank you so much for being with us. Stay with CNN. We'll be right back.
All right, ahead here in the arena, our panel shares their memories of Ted Turner and his impact spreads far and wide beyond the world of cable news.
I really don't think about myself that much in my past. I think about the future of humanity mostly, and what we're doing wrong and what we can do to correct what we're doing, and how I can influence that so that my children and grandchildren and yours will have a wonderful life, the opportunity to have a wonderful life the way we had. To act upon one's convictions while others wait, to create a positive force in a world where cynics abound, to provide information to people when it wasn't available before. I dedicate the news channel for America, the cable news network.
That was then, this is now, and today we lost a titan and a true visionary. Ted Turner, our network's founder, passed away at 87. When he created CNN and with it 24/7 news, history unfolded live in our living rooms, from the fall of the Berlin Wall to the Space Shuttle Challenger disaster, and perhaps most notably, the Gulf War. But his legacy extends far beyond us here at CNN. He was a philanthropist who started the United Nations Foundation. He was an activist for the elimination of nuclear weapons and a conservationist who played a crucial role in saving the American bison. Our panel is back to reflect on his life and his legacy. John King, what do you remember most?
So I came here at a very interesting time. I started here in the spring of 1997. Ted had sold CNN to AOL Time Warner in late 1996. So the merger was just happening. And Ted was around for a little bit, but he was segueing out. And so my memory is of watching sort of the cowboy cable network, the rebel cowboy cable network become more corporate. In some ways for the better. In my few conversations with Ted, I don't pretend to know Ted well. He sent me a few nice notes when I broke stories at the White House. He would send a note or pick up the phone and call you, which was very gracious. In my few conversations with him, he would grumble that he often didn't like some of the things that were happening to his company as it became more corporate, because he was someone who would walk into the newsroom in Atlanta in his bathrobe.
I don't think you can do that now.
So culturally very, very different. As a journalist, I covered the first Gulf War for the AP, the Associated Press, and that's when I met Christiane Amanpour. Found out we went to the same college. I didn't know that when she was there. But that, as a journalist, you could see the power of CNN. I was an AP Wire guy, and it was like, whoa, I didn't know these guys were going to have such a global impact, and boom.
The Wire on TV.
Yeah,
revolutionary.
There it is.
Jamie?
I worked for NBC for 32 years, and so that's where I was when that happened, and I was actually sitting in the Pentagon for NBC in the Gulf War, and I will tell you, we were jealous. I mean, watching the war live, we talk about the CNN effect, but it had never happened like that before, that you could watch it in real time, 24 hours a day. One quick story, Bernie Shaw, when he came back from the coverage, President Bush 41 had him come over to the White House because President Bush was really worried about the CNN reporters who were over there. And he said to Bernie, I was really worried about you. And Bernie said, I was really worried about me too. But on a serious note, President Bush 41 told me that watching the war on TV, watching it on CNN, had an impact on decisions he made along the way.
Well, it had a decision on somebody like me. As a kid, I would come home and watch what was happening in the Gulf War. I would see global events in my living room. This was the democratization of media. Right. And we see this long run. CNN is a part of this long run that is the culmination of this is effectively citizen journalism accessing the internet. But CNN was an integral part of this. I got the advantage, and the political education I got was coming home from school. You might be shocked by this, but I came home to watch the 4 p.m. show on CNN about what was happening daily in Washington. And it's a honor to be on the 4 p.m. show.
Hey, you know, I feel the same way, actually, as someone who, you know, came to it. I mean, we're all showing our age, our respective ages.
Asking anyone what grade you were in.
As we tell these stories, but I remember living in Palm Beach County during Hanging Chads, and sorry, John, I know you were well into your career as a working journalist at this point. I was in high school, but coming home and turning on CNN just to see what was happening kind of right around the corner from me. I want to play just because they're kind of my favorite things. Some of my favorite things to do is on TV is to play some of this history, and CNN does have it, and it's been touched on here. Let's watch a little bit of Bernie Shaw covering the Gulf War, just because, you know, John just gave voice to him, and again, Ted, the person who put together the network, put Bernie Shaw on the air at a time, frankly, when in many ways that was groundbreaking all by itself. Watch.
This is something is happening outside. Peter Arnett joined me here. Let's describe to our viewers what we're seeing. The skies over Baghdad have been illuminated. We're seeing bright flashes going off all over the sky.
So that's 1991. And then fast forward a few years, here was Ted Turner reflecting with Larry King, who of course is an icon, again, because of Ted Turner, about CNN's success. Watch.
What about it has surprised you the most?
Well, there have been a lot of surprises, but I would just say that it worked out as well as it did. You know, a lot of times.
Did you envision this growth?
Well, I didn't have any upper limits to how far we could go, so I thought it would be a big success, but I guess I couldn't have figured it would have been this big a success.
Well, and of course we are still here today, and as we close our reflections, this is from Ted's memoir. He wrote it in 2008, and he said this, quote, "I've often considered and joked about what I might want written on my tombstone. At one point, when I felt like I couldn't get out of the way of the press, 'You can't interview me here' was a leading candidate. In the middle of my career, I considered 'Here lies Ted Turner. He never owned a broadcast network.' These days, I'm leaning toward 'I have nothing more to say.'" We remember him fondly. We'll be right back. The arena, Jake Tapper, standing by for the lead. Hi, Jake.
Thanks, Casey. We'll look for more tomorrow in the arena. Another Democrat and political opponent of President Trump is under federal investigation. The lead starts right now. Paying tribute to CNN founder Ted Turner, who died today at the age of 87. We're going to talk to two of the CNN voices who Turner put on the anchor desk first. Welcome to The Lead. I'm Jake Tapper, and we are going to start tonight with our law and justice lead and a new federal investigation into yet another Democratic politician. Coming up next, reflecting on the life of Ted Turner, the philanthropist, business maverick, sports team owner, and most notably, Here Where I Am. He's the man who created CNN. We're going to talk about his legendary career with the duo who anchored CNN's very first newscast nearly 46 years ago.
I don't know how to quit. It's not in my genes. I worked till 7 o'clock, and when I got home, the news was over. So I missed television news completely, and I figured there were lots of people like me. It was more than just a company to me. It was a way of life.
In our national lead, CNN founder Ted Turner died today, peacefully at his home in Montana. He was 87. Turner, of course, started CNN back in 1980. By then, he had won sailing's top prize, the America's Cup, and he'd revolutionized television by using satellites to put his Atlanta superstation on cable TV systems throughout the country. Then he bought the Atlanta Braves so he could have something to broadcast nationwide. He was a risk taker. Perhaps his biggest risk was starting a 24-hour cable news channel. CNN signed on air June 1st, 1980.
Good evening, I'm David Walker.
And I'm Lois Hart. Now here's the news.
With us now, CNN's debut anchor duo, Lois Hart, David Walker. They had been married for about a year when that aired. They're still married, I'm happy to say. David, tell us about how you met Ted and how you came to CNN. How'd that happen?
Well, I got a phone call at a local station here in Sacramento, and it said there was a guy by the name of Sam Zellman, who was a CBS News producer at the time. I didn't know that, but I found out later that that's what he did. They said, we'd like to talk to you about CNN. And I thought to myself, what the heck is CNN? I had no idea. Well, we later came to learn that it was a brand new idea that they would be broadcasting national and international news events. And I thought that would really be exciting and interesting to take part in. So we signed up. And believe me, Jake, in those days, we weren't quite sure if we had enough news to fill 24/7 newscasts.
That's funny.
But it turned out to be that was not the case. We had plenty of affiliate coverage. Some stories not so interesting and exciting, but it may air anyway. So, yeah, we did that, and we had our very first newscast. We had the Mario boat lift. We had Vernon Jordan being an assassination attempt in Indianapolis. And we had a live feed from Jerusalem. So we were kind of showing off what we're capable of. And from the very first newscast, I think CNN has gone on to be a trendsetter. And I thought at the time as well that we're going to change things. The news business and TV in particular will never be the same.
Lois, what was Ted Turner like when those first few times that you met him?
Well, certainly like nobody I'd met before. And I want to say, good to see you, Jake. Everybody that I've been talking with all day on the text, we're all very sad, of course. And I want to mention my friends, because lots of people were instrumental in getting CNN started, not just the executives that Ted recruited well, but the talent, Denise and Bobby and Lou and Flip and Don and Chris and lots of people I haven't mentioned, and Jane and Janice and all kinds of people that I miss and that are still friends with. It was a different atmosphere, and of course everybody is curious about what Ted was like. That's the first thing everybody talks about. And in the early days, Ted, of course, says, and it was true, he lived in that building, our first home there. And he really did come down. We were out in the mornings, very early in the mornings, and he would come down, and the lore is in his bathrobe. I'm not sure about that, but he did come down to get coffee, and he really, I think he did have a little sofa, and it was a lot different than most traditional newsrooms in that there wasn't an existing hierarchy when we all started, and so it really was quite different and a lot of fun and a lot of work. And nobody really knew Ted that well at that, time, but he certainly made his presence known to everybody, and he's a singular individual, as CNN has reported all day long. I'd give anything to lead one of his 10 existences,
David,
I remember in the news, he'd walk down, as Lois says, in his bathrobe. He'd have a little cup with him. I'm pretty sure he was chewing tobacco, which is kind of odd at that time of the morning, but come on, hey, how y'all this morning? That was Ted. I never worked for somebody that was called the Mouth of the South or Captain Courageous and that sort. And he was, as they said at the time, he was cool before cable was cool.
Lois, a lot has changed in the nearly 46 years that CNN's been around. What do you think Ted Turner's legacy will be?
Things are nice.
Environmentalism. When I ask my friends online today, say, what is the best of Ted? And everybody says, and I agree, the conservation efforts. An interview earlier mentioned his peace. And, when you think of all his efforts in the media and in conservation, it all had the overriding umbrella of I want to make the world better. It was all about what can I do to make the world better. It wasn't just that he wanted to make a fortune in television or that he wanted to save the buffaloes or engage in environmentalism. It was all about what he could do to make the entire world better. It wasn't just about any one field. Look, I'm sure you're showing the pictures. He talked to world leaders. It was all about his broad vision. He was a big thinker. He was, obviously he was the visionary.
Yeah. What a treat it is for me to talk to you, Lois Hart, David Walker. Thank you so much to both of you for coming on the show today.
Thank
We
you.
really appreciate it.
Keep up the good work, Jake. Thanks.
Thank you.